Chapter 292. Who's spouting nonsense? Yu Qianshou glared at him. You called Senior by an old fart behind his back. Do you admit it? Healy paled in fright and could no longer kneel. He hurriedly stood up and yelled, Yu Qianshou, if you keep talking nonsense, don't blame me for being impolite. With the other's provocation, Yu Qianshou's character from back when he roamed the streets once more appeared. There was nothing to be afraid of in a quarrel, let alone a duel. He stopped kneeling and immediately stood up. He rolled up his sleeves and pulled out his sword. He held the sword in his hand like a machete and waved it twice. He sneered and said, Birdman, you want to fight because you have a guilty conscience, don't you? You don't dare to let me finish? His image as a street scoundrel caused by Changchun's eyes to freeze for a moment. Healy glanced at his master and bit his lip until it was white. In the end he did not dare to attack, but his entire body trembled in anger. He had lived in the demon region for many years. Although his cultivation was not at the peak, whether it was the Yao King or the Ghost King, no one dared to act so rudely with him. Today he had finally met his match. Yu Qianshou seemed to realize that his current appearance was a disgrace and had ruined the righteous image he had just put on. With an embarrassed expression, he sheathed his sword and cupped his hands to Bai Changchun. Senior Bai, that day Healy told Junior that Senior had gone out and would need 10 some days to return. He also told me that this world had 3 true flames and that Twilight Valley hid one of the 3 true flames, the Azure Flame. He spent all his effort to entice Junior's heart and finally tricked Junior into entering Twilight Valley? Nonsense, it was clearly you who used the roasted fish to trick me into taking you there. Healy's voice was harsh, his 2 hands forming into claws. Gray evil energy curled around his fingertips and seethed with killing intent. At the slightest misstep he would deliver a fatal blow. To the side, Yu Qianshou naturally saw and sensed this, and he immediately became cautious on the inside. Why would I lie to a birdman like you? If you didn't tell me about Twilight Valley's hidden blue and that 9 nethers hidden black, who the hell would know that there was some 3 true flames here? I've never even heard of them before. What? Do you really want to kill someone in front of Senior Bai? Yu Qianshou put on a disdainful look, he turned around and continued to salute. Junior was trapped by Healy in the green fire great array, only then did I know the cause of the matter from his mouth. He said that the senior wanted to pass the position of torture envoy of the demon ghost region to someone called Mr. Nongzhu, but that Mr. Nongzhu was not willing to take over. Instead he suggested letting Healy take over. In the end I happened to come to Obedient Island and lived here as an outsider for the first time. Healy was worried that Senior would pass the position of punishment envoy to me, so he wanted to kill me. The reason was that Senior and I were both humans while he was a demon. After some insider information that outsiders did not know was revealed, Healy's face turned ashen. He knew that everything was over. His claws returned to normal, and the vicious aura retracted back into his body. He stood there as if he was waiting for death. He was well aware of his master's cultivation. If his master wanted his life, he wouldn't even have a chance to do so. Yu Qianshou glanced at him and proudly continued, Junior found it strange at the time. With his cultivation he could have killed me anywhere, so why did he have to go through so much trouble to lure me to Twilight Valley's green fire great array? After asking, I learned that the demon ghost region has been intimidated by a set of spirit treasures, and no battle can escape Senior's discerning eyes. As long as he trapped me in the green fire great array and waited for the green fire great array to erupt, this Junior would die without anyone knowing. Not even Senior would know. At that time he could just make up a reason for my escape and easily escape responsibility. In truth, to this Junior, a mere core formation cultivator dying in the demon ghost region is nothing. At this point Yu Qianshou suddenly revealed a pained expression. He thrust his sword at Healy and yelled, but that birdman was completely deranged. He said that Senior would show some mercy to any human that came to the demon ghost region, but he would be merciless to the Yao ghosts, killing them without mercy. He wanted to vent the anger of the demi-humans and actually wanted to use the power of the demon ghost region to rampage through the human world once he had complete control over the demon ghost region. For this, even if this Junior had to escape Twilight Valley, he would risk his life to come here and expose the truth to Senior. As he spoke, he deeply bowed to Bai Changchun. But when he bowed, Bai Changchun did not react for a long time, as if he had never heard him. Yu Qianshou stood up and saw that Bai Changchun was unperturbed and expressionless. Moreover, he had closed his eyes once more. Crane Li also discovered it, and exchanged a glance with Yu Qianshou, his enemy. The former's stunned expression revealed a look of joy, while the latter was cursing in his heart. Now that things have reached this point, this disciple admits it all and does not dare to hide anything, nor does he dare to beg for Master's forgiveness. I implore Master to punish me. This disciple will die without complaint. It is just that I have let down Master's many years of guidance. This disciple's heart aches, but it is too late for regrets. In the blink of an eye, Healy had already knelt on the ground with tears streaming down his face, admitting his guilt. Fuck. Was he playing the sympathy card? This Birdman could really go act. Damn. He was just about to succeed, so he didn't want to ruin it. Yu Qianzhou's expression twitched, and he immediately knelt down. In order to protect the peace of the human world, Senior has presided over this desolate land for more than 2,000 years. Such a magnificent feat is truly a model for the human cultivation world. If Junior has the chance to return to the human world, he will definitely spread the praises of Senior's deeds, and Senior will be revered by all generations. His bootlicking was simply too flattering. He was flattering by Changchun, but he was killing Healy. He and Healy had already caused such a ruckus that neither of them would let the other go. The two kneeling there were well aware of this. Yu Qianzhou wanted to flatter by Changchun until he had no choice but to kill Healy. Sending two more flattering hats was just a bit of lip service, but leaving behind a future problem would be troublesome. Healy naturally understood, and a hint of resentment flashed through his eyes. He suddenly turned his head and said, Yu Qianzhou, I admit that I tricked you into the blue fire array, but there is one thing I don't understand. The array inside the blue fire array and the array outside Twilight Valley are both ancient arrays. Ordinary people who don't understand the technique cannot enter and leave. How did you escape from inside? Yu Qianzhou's heart chilled. This Birdman truly wasn't a good person. He was clearly saying this for Bai Changchun to hear. If he didn't give a good explanation, even if Bai Changchun killed this Birdman, it wouldn't end well for him. Fortunately, he had already considered this point and had a countermeasure. As for his invincible escape technique and his life-saving technique, he definitely wouldn't say anything. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and smiled. Healy, do you still remember the murals in Twilight Valley? Healy put on a sincere expression and asked, could the murals in Twilight Valley contain some sort of method to break arrays? That's not right. You were trapped in the blue fire array, so you couldn't have come out and carefully studied the murals. Could it be that you've memorized all the murals on both sides just by passing by? That's not it. Let me ask you, do you know the origins of the woman in the murals? Yu Qianzhou asked with a smile. The two of them continued to exchange questions and answers as if the bickering had never happened. I know. She's the divine craftsman's maid, Little Snow. Is Little Snow correct? Let me ask you, do you know her origins? Healy suspiciously replied, I don't know. Could it be that her origins are related to your escape? As expected of a smart person. AI. If anyone else had been trapped by you, they would have undoubtedly died, and your scheme would have succeeded. Unfortunately, you ran into me. The will of the heavens wants me to live. Yu Qianzhou looked at Healy and gave a pleased smile. The extreme north has the snow fox race, and Little Snow comes from there. Just like you, I'm a demi-human. After the divine craftsman died, Little Snow returned to the snow fox race and passed down a few treasures and arrays that the divine craftsman had refined. Coincidentally, I had a rather good relationship with the snow fox race, and the blue fire array and the array outside Twilight Valley were also recorded in the snow fox race. Coincidentally, I also read about them. I spent some time pondering and managed to escape just like that. Healy, don't you think that the heavens have not forsaken me? Healy stood there in a daze, completely speechless. Even he had run into such a coincidence. Even Bai Changchun's brows twitched, as if this was his first time learning of Little Snow's origins. He opened his eyes, and his gaze swept over the two of them. His lips moved slightly as he spat out an ancient voice. Are the two of you done arguing? I won't ask who's right or wrong, nor will I say anything else. Only one of you can stay alive on Obedient Island. Do as you see fit. After saying this, he closed his eyes again. What did he mean? The two of them were dumbfounded. They had been quarreling like monkeys for a long time, but this was what Bai Changchun had been holding back for so long. Then what had they been arguing about? He clearly wanted the two of them to fuck. Yu Qianzhou came to his senses and let out a strange cry. The sword in his hand shot at Healy like a bolt of lightning. This was a fight to the death. He naturally had to strike first. Chapter 293. When Healy heard his master's words, he was overjoyed. His cultivation level was clearly higher than Yu Qianzhou's by a large margin. His master's actions were clearly biased towards him. But before he could finish being happy, Yu Qianzhou made the first move. He didn't even greet him and attacked. Yu Qianzhou's actions were considered a sneak attack. but the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. It would have been strange if a sneak attack had succeeded. Heli roared, "Despicable." At the same time, his fingers formed 5 claws and he waved his hand to deflect the flying sword. The two of them were very close. After the flying sword was deflected, Heli aimed for Yu Qianzhou's shoulder. Yu Qianzhou wasn't an idiot. He knew that the chance of this sword injuring his opponent was very small. When he released the flying sword, he slapped the ground with his other hand. The kneeling person stood up and bounced into the air. The flying sword that was deflected by Heli returned in a blink of an eye and caught Yu Qianzhou. "You feathered animal, you dare to say the word despicable in front of me? Are you done being despicable and I'm not allowed to be despicable?" "I said the wrong thing. How can I be the old man of a feathered animal?" Yu Qianzhou stood in the air and cursed. At the same time, "Xiao xiao" sounds could be heard. Nearly 100 flying swords flew out from his storage pouch and circled around his body. It was a spectacular sight to behold. Once the flying swords appeared, he could immediately feel that after his cultivation level reached the late stage of core formation, he could control them more freely. To Heli, he felt that this was a battle without any suspense. It was an opportunity given to him by his master. Looking up at Yu Qianzhou, he sneered, "You're the one who asked for it. Don't blame me." His hands formed into claws and slowly lifted up. The vicious energy around his claws reappeared and solidified into something that looked like scales. His hands looked like claws. Evil chi emanated from his claws and revolved around his arms, slowly covering his entire body, forming a faintly discernible membrane on the surface of his body. Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes as he looked down. This was the 3rd time he had fought against a master in the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage. The first time he caused trouble at supporting Immortal Island's new talent assembly, he was severely injured by Dongfang Chang'ao and fled. The second time was not long ago when he had a small test with Wu Jinggang. He didn't expect the 3rd time to come so soon. This time was different from the previous 2 times. It would be a fierce battle. Although he didn't know what Bai Changchun's intentions were, he wouldn't give up easily until the last moment. He only had one chance to ride on Bai Changchun's coattails. If he didn't try his best, how would he know the result? Therefore he wouldn't run away easily. He was destined to fight to the end. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never used his full strength in a battle. Today he would get what he wanted. After noticing the change in He Li's hands, a thought suddenly flashed in Yu Qianzhou's mind. He had never seen this birdman holding any weapons. His original body was a crane. Could it be that he was used to using his claws? The membrane on his body was naturally his protective aura. He didn't know if his flying swords would be able to break through his aura. "Go!" Yu Qianzhou opened his eyes and pointed down with the sword-driving art. Among the swords that were dancing around him, 50 flying swords flashed in all directions, drifting erratically around He Li, appearing and disappearing at a speed that was hard to predict with the naked eye. Their speed was extremely fast, quietly approaching the target. Now that his cultivation had increased, he could control flying swords with such ease. "Feels so good." This was what Yu Qianzhou was thinking at this moment. He Li was as motionless as a mountain, his eyes darting left and right as he guarded against any sudden attacks from the flying swords. He had never seen someone like Yu Qianzhou who could simultaneously control so many flying swords. However, he didn't panic in the slightest. No matter how mystical Yu Qianzhou's sword control technique was, he was still a core formation cultivator and couldn't pose much of a threat to him. However, he wasn't one to underestimate his opponent. He waited here and didn't move because he wanted to see just how much strength Yu Qianzhou had. After all, the fact that Yu Qianzhou had been able to escape from Twilight Valley meant that he wasn't as simple as he made himself out to be. If that really was the case, he would quickly end this battle. At some point, Bai Changchun was standing under the eaves with his hands behind his back, calmly watching the battle unfold before him. He Li's calmness and vigilance allowed Yu Qianzhou to guess what he was planning. His eyes narrowed and a glint flashed in his eyes. He took out a stack of yellow talismans from his bag of holding, and with a wave of his left hand, a group of yellow shadows shot toward He Li. He Li glanced up in surprise. He hadn't expected that Yu Qianzhou would be able to control so many flying swords at the same time and still have the time to do something else. He glanced at the flickering cold light around him, and his protective stellar energy surged, rapidly thickening. At this moment, the group of yellow shadows exploded, engulfing He Li in flames. He Li sneered. So it was just a bunch of fire talismans. Did these things really think they could injure him? As the flames spread to the surrounding houses, Bai Changchun's long beard fluttered without any wind, and the flames stopped right in front of the houses. As the flames burned, Yu Qianqiu threw out a stack of talismans in his right hand. A group of yellow shadows rushed into the sea of flames, and immediately after, a series of loud explosions rang out. The entire Abedian island could probably feel the tremors. These were the astral breaker talismans made by Qin Feng. However, these talismans seemed to have some effect on early nascent soul stage cultivators, but not on tribulation stage cultivators. Yu Qianqiu naturally knew this, and the effect he wanted was to confuse the eyes and ears. The astral breaker talismans rang out, and Yu Qianqiu formed a hand seal. Within the sea of flames and smoke below, a cold light flashed continuously, followed by a series of rapid explosions that lasted for a long time. However, after a short while, the explosions gradually faded until there was no more movement. In the air, Yu Qianqiu's expression changed. The 50 flying swords that he had released were all gathered together, and were no longer under his control. What was going on? Not long after, the flames burned out, and the smoke from the astral breaker talismans gradually dissipated. He Li's ferocious smile appeared, and in his hand was a large number of flying swords that were gathered together. These were the flying swords that Yu Qianqiu had released. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. The flying swords were so fast, but they were all caught by He Li. Is that all you've got? He Li sneered. As he spoke, he twisted his hands, and the 50 flying swords that had been tempered by the black gold sand made a zhi-zhi sound. In the blink of an eye, he twisted them into a ball and threw them to the ground. Damn it! What kind of rotten claw is that? It's simply abnormal. Yu Qianqiu's eyelids twitched. Even though he was at a disadvantage in a fight, he still had to take advantage of his words. Then I'll let you know the power of my crane claw. He Li snorted coldly. His figure suddenly disappeared. It was as if he had teleported. He felt that he had figured out Yu Qianqiu's background, so he immediately launched an attack. Yu Qianqiu's pupils shrank. Could it be the teleportation at the end of the crossing calamity? No. He vaguely saw a shadow flickering in the air. It was definitely not teleportation, but because the speed was too fast. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a fatal threat. With a thought, the surrounding flying swords danced around his body, forming a cold light to protect his body. Dang, a crisp sound was heard. Several flying swords were slapped away. Due to the obstruction of the flying swords, He Li appeared not far away. He drilled through the sword net and stretched out his claws. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. With a thought, the surrounding flying swords turned around and shot towards a person
who was
like
not good at
long-range attacks, but good at
Unfortunately,
close-range
they
attacks
collided
would
with
certainly
He's
have a stronger
protective aura
defense.
chi and
Yu
bounced off.
Qianqiu was chased
They
in the
simply
air.
could not break
He
through his
dodged left and
protective
right.
aura chi.
The bounced flying swords were once again regrouped and continued to attack. Rapid explosions resounded in the air. Although He Li was not afraid of these flying swords, they still hindered his flying speed. He could not catch up to Yu Qianqiu in a short period of time. After a long time he was naturally annoyed. His hands moved like a phantom. Every flying sword that flew towards him was caught by him. As long as they were caught, Yu Qianqiu would not be able to take them back based on his cultivation. Other than those who were at the end of the crossing tribulation, this was the first time Yu Qianqiu had seen someone who could attack so quickly. His flying swords were already fast enough. But his opponent was actually able to catch them with his bare hands. This was a little too fast. He did not know that He Li was a crane of the demon race. He was most proficient in speed. How could an ordinary person compare to him? Especially his pair of claws. Although he did not use any treasures, his claws were not inferior to treasures. Moreover, they could evolve along with his cultivation. He Li caught 4 or 5 flying swords and threw them away. After a few times, there were not many flying swords left in the air. But Yu Qianqiu had no choice. If he did not use his flying swords, he would be caught. Fuck. When the last few swords in the air were twisted into a dough twist, Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. He Li had already shot towards him like lightning. Yu Qianqiu did not dodge. He knew that he could not dodge with his speed. So he jumped down from the flying sword. It looked like he was jumping off a building to his death. The flying sword under his feet played its final role in blocking the enemy. It whistled as it shot towards He Li. Yu Qianqiu shouted as he fell, "Senior Bai, save me." His voice was extremely miserable. Creak. The last sword was sacrificed. He Li laughed evilly and pounced towards Yu Qianqiu. He stretched out his claws and pierced the top of Yu Qianqiu's head. Looking down, he suddenly saw Yu Qianqiu raising his head and looking at him coldly. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and pointed 2 fingers at his own claw. He was really courting death. Crane Li's smile became even more radiant. His 5 claws fiercely clasped onto the 2 fingers that Yu Qianqiu had pointed at him. If nothing unexpected happened, they would be able to see a badly mutilated scene and miserable screams. But an accident really happened. The moment the fingers and claws intersected, Yu Qianqiu's 2 fingers flashed with a demonic green light. He Li's claws immediately felt a burning pain. The gang qi covering his claws was instantly broken. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted. He had condensed the highest temperature of his blue flame to unleash this attack. He had spent half a day putting on a show just to wait for Li He's carelessness. In this battle it was either you die or I live. There was no room for negotiation. He Li could not run away. Although the power of the blue flame was huge, but with his opponent's high cultivation, it would be difficult to get close to him. He Li could not catch up to him. No matter how powerful the blue flame was, it would be useless if it could not hit him. After witnessing He Li's speed, Yu Qianqiu was even more determined to lure the enemy. Only when the enemy was careless, would it be the best opportunity for his blue flame to show its power. And this attack really worked. The green flame shot out from his 2 fingers instantly broke through Heli's earth energy, and directly burned the claw that was reaching out towards him to ashes. Yu Qianqiu would not give him a second chance. Even if he worked hard to lure the enemy, he would not give He Li a chance to turn things around. Ya! Yu Qianqiu roared. Before he could even retract his finger, a burst of vigorous green flame surged out of his body. The incomparably high temperature quickly engulfed He Li, who was on top of him. The green flame spun and emitted a hoo-hoo sound. Then, a green pillar of flame soared into the sky and wrapped around He Li with an imposing aura that shook everyone's mind. Ah, it's the blue fire? He Li let out a blood-curdling scream. When he came to his senses, he twisted his body, but before he could escape, he disappeared within the flames. In the end, he was unable to resist the burning of the blue flames that Yu Qianqiu had used to kill his enemies. Bai Changchun, who was under the eaves, witnessed this scene. His eyes flashed, but he did not say a word. Chapter 294. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief as the green flame slowly receded back into his body. He was afraid that he would not be able to break through He Li's gang qi, so when he pointed his finger, he had condensed almost 1/10 of the fire elements in his body. This was also the limit of his current cultivation. If one day his cultivation was high enough, he would be able to condense all the fire elements in his body into one point. Presumably, the power would be even more astonishing. This was like comparing a piece of burning paper to a piece of burning firewood. After igniting, the paper and firewood may both release flames of the same size, but if you grab the burning paper, you might be able to extinguish it. Of course, your hand would be burned. But if you grab the burning firewood with your hand, even if you could extinguish it, you would be able to smell the aroma of roasted meat on your palm. From this, it could be seen that as long as you provided more fire elements, the more powerful it would be. This was the same principle as the flames released by Yu Qianqiu. Under the suppression of a flame of the same size, the more fire elements Yu Qianqiu provided, the higher the temperature. That small point contained 1/10 of the fire elements in his body. In addition to the overbearing nature of the green flame, how could He Li endure it? The compressed green flame, in addition to the released from his body, instantly forced out nearly 30% of the fire elements in his body. Although a lot of it was recovered in the end, there was still nearly 1/10 of the fire elements in his body. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. If he had not met such a strong opponent, he would not have been so extravagant. If he had to do it a few more times, the fire elements in his body would only be enough for him to use it 10 times at most. Turning around silently, Yu Qianqiu looked at the legendary celestial being. He did not know what would happen next. After all, he had killed Bai Changchun's disciple, and he had comprehended the star flame fire art from the stars. If Bai Changchun comprehended the star flame fire art from the heavenly Tao, Bai Changchun would understand with a single glance. But if it was different, Bai Changchun would naturally question him, especially when he used the azure flame. A core formation cultivator can actually kill a tribulation passing stage cultivator. You do have some skill. No wonder you dared to break into my Shantian island. Bai Changchun stood under the eaves and nodded. He could not see how He Li's death affected him. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, "Senior is overpraising me. Heli was careless. I only succeeded by chance. Rumor has it that there is a god of fire in the immortal world, but I have only heard of fire-controlling magic tools in the mortal world. I did not expect that I would be able to broaden my horizons today. There is actually someone who can use his own body as a magic tool, storing fire in his body to be controlled. However, this method of control is a little clumsy, otherwise Heli would have been defeated by your hands long ago. I don't know which expert taught you this technique. To be able to have such a divine ability, I presume your master is not a nobody in the cultivation world. Can you tell this old man? This old man wants to pay a visit. Bai Changchun said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. I won't hide it from you, senior. I have 2 masters, but unfortunately I didn't inherit their teachings. Currently all the skills I use are self-created and I practice them randomly to protect myself. Self-created? Bai Changchun's expression was slightly moved. Anyone who was able to create their own cultivation technique was an outstanding genius, and their achievements were higher than ordinary people. Even Bai Changchun himself was like this. His eyebrows twitched as he asked, since you have a master, why didn't you inherit their teachings? Why don't you tell me? It seemed that this old fellow's Tao was different from his own. Yu Qianqiu speculated to himself. He immediately recounted how he had become Ong Guangsang's disciple and how he had been abandoned on Fuxin Island. Of course, he only said things that were beneficial to him, and he deleted the unfavorable parts. In short, he described himself as extremely wronged. So that's how it was. Bai Changchun nodded, not expressing any doubt. He then asked, did you use Twilight Valley's azure flame just now? Senior is wise. Heli trapped me in the azure fire array, but he did not know that this junior was like a fish in water. This junior precisely used the azure flame, Yu Qianqiu replied. He also understood that if he wanted to stay in the demon realm, the secret of this fire technique would be exposed sooner or later. It was better to tell the truth to avoid trouble later on. Heli trapped you in the azure flame, but in the end he died to it. It could be said that the heavenly Tao's cycle of retribution is not pleasant. Bai Changchun calmly gazed at Yu Qianqiu and said, I said before that between you and Heli, only one can stay alive on Obedient Island. Since you have survived and have no master, then stay. Starting from today, I will leave the deficient flame profound fruit to you. Be careful not to make any mistakes or else I will not forgive you. After saying this, he returned to his room and sat down cross-legged. He then added, repair the damaged ground outside the room. He then closed his eyes. He said all this, not caring whether Yu Qianqiu agreed or not. It was over just like that? Yu Qianqiu froze and then looked at the craters on the ground. These were all caused by his astral-shattering talismans. He did not dare to ask any more questions. First, he collected the flying swords that were twisted by Heli. Although they were already useless, the materials were still there. They could still be used if he refined them again. It was not difficult to level the ground again. He just had to go outside and dig some soil to fill it. Then he swept the ground and it would be done. Then he went to the deficient flame profound fruit that was originally under Heli's care. Looking at the fiery red leaves swaying in the wind, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a bit of a toothache. This piece of land, in addition to his original land, was enough for him to work hard. But this was not a big deal. The key was that each of these plants needed high-grade spirit stones to grow every day. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and was a little unhappy. The old man didn't give him any benefits, nor did he hint that he would pass the position of torture envoy to him in the future. Did he want him to pay spirit stones in advance to help him grow vegetables? Over time it would not be a small number. Sigh. The old man does not know how to behave. He did not even give me any verbal encouragement. You are ruthless. I admit defeat. Just as he was complaining in his heart, Bai Changchun's voice sounded in his ears. I have already sent a message to the entire demon ghost domain. From today onwards you are my disciple. You can walk freely in the demon ghost domain, and no one will make things difficult for you. The spirit stones needed to grow the deficient flame profound fruit can be asked from any demon king or ghost king in the demon ghost domain. They will give it to you. And then, Yu Qianqiu nodded his head in a daze. His face was full of surprise and he could not hide it even if he wanted to. Happiness came too suddenly. The old man looked very boring, but he did not expect him to like to surprise people. Look, he accidentally became the old man's disciple. Wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted in the demon ghost domain in the future? Damn. There were many good things in the demon ghost domain. Not bad, very good. Disciple understands. Yu Qianqiu bowed towards the center of the island. He stood up and counted with his fingers. This was already his third master. However, this master was not an ordinary person. The first 2 masters could not be compared to him. The moment he opened his mouth, he gave Yu Qianqiu an inexhaustible amount of money. Get to work. Without saying a word, Yu Qianqiu took out a pile of spirit stones and busied himself. It did not matter if he paid the capital first. Anyway, someone would reimburse him. His enthusiasm was like the overflowing yellow river, endless. Chapter 295. By Changchun picking Yu Qianqiu to plant the lac flame profound fruit was definitely the wisest choice. The most important thing was that this guy had done this before, so he could directly take up the post without any training. Especially in terms of his work attitude, there was no lack of commendable points. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was immersed in hard work. There were about 200 lakh flame-profound fruits in the piece of land that he had opened before, but there were about 1,800 left by Healy, so there were about 2,000 in total. Calculating it, he would consume more than 2,000 high-grade spirit stones every day. After calculating, the busy Yu Qianqiu was thinking about when to go to the Ghost King's house to get to know them. 2,000 a day in a year, it would be more than 700,000 high-grade spirit stones. In the cultivation world, it was enough to support several small sections. Everyone was working under Bai Changchun, so why did he have to pay for it alone? Thinking about how he still had a large number of subordinates to support, and how high the salary he gave to his subordinates, the expenses were huge. Since I am already Bai Changchun's disciple, then what I have is master's. Helping master to support a large number of people is my duty. For the time being, it is better not to tell master. I will help master take care of them secretly and find a suitable opportunity to tell master. After finding a reason to comfort myself, the work was done. Yu Qianqiu cast his gaze outside the Thousand Li Ping Lake. Those demon kings and ghost king who were mingling in master's territory should pay some taxes. What excuse should I use to collect them? Oh, I will just say that I am collecting protection fees. Yu Qianqiu was in a good mood and let out a long sigh of relief. Awesome. From today onwards, I can do whatever I want in the demon ghost region. This is something that I did not even dare to think about when I first came here. Thinking back to when I first came here, Meng Yan showed off his power to me. Now I really want to return it to him. Unfortunately, that guy was killed by Bai Changchun. It seems that I can only find an opportunity to show off in front of his widowed wife. Speaking of Yu Ji, at this time, Yu Ji was sitting in the Ghost King's hall with inexplicable surprise. The news of Meng Yan's death really made her sad for a long time. The fate of the two of them for countless years had ended here. Meng Yan, who was dead, could not be with her in the next life forever. The dead was dead and the living still had a future to walk. After experiencing the prosperity of the human world and experiencing the tribulation, she became a ghost cultivator for thousands of years. Yu Ji was sad. She thought that without the protection of Meng Yan, she would fall under the crotch of other ghost cultivators, with her appearance. Who knew that Bai Changchun would give her the power of the Ghost King here, which was Ghost Yan? It was a surprise. Yan. Although her cultivation was not very high, as long as she was still in the demon ghost territory, no one dared to disobey Bai Changchun's decree. However, today Bai Changchun's message surprised her again. Yu Ji was stunned for a long time. Healy deceived his master and destroyed his ancestors. He committed treason and heresy, and has been executed. Today I have accepted a new disciple named Yu Qianqiu, and I hope to cooperate with him in the demon ghost territory. She thought she had heard it wrong. Yu Qianqiu? Was it that Yu Qianqiu? That Yu Qianqiu actually became Bai Changchun's disciple? After coming to herself, she immediately confirmed her guess. Who else could Yu Qianqiu be except the Yu Qianqiu who broke into the demon ghost territory and was detained by Bai Changchun? He became Bai Changchun's disciple? He became Bai Changchun's disciple. Yu Ji sat on the throne with an inexplicable expression. She still remembered the oath that Yu Qianqiu made to her in the past. He said that when he had the ability he would take her and her out of the demon ghost territory. Now that Meng Yan was dead but she was still alive, then Yu Qianqiu must fulfill the oath that he made in the past. Otherwise, cultivators would suffer the wrath of heaven. Yu Ji's bright eyes sparkled, and there was no doubt that there was a hint of joy in her eyes. She had made a forward-looking investment in the past, just for a possibility. She didn't expect that such a thing would happen. It seemed that there was a high chance that she could leave the demon ghost territory. Under the throne, 2 rows of ghost generals in armor stood in great numbers. The group of generals had suspicious looks on their faces. They all noticed the abnormality of Yu Ji. Sai Zhangfei stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Madam, did something happen?" Hearing this, Yu Ji restrained her emotions and her expression became solemn. She looked down at the people below, but her heart was in turmoil. "I've had enough of this half-human, half-ghost life. I don't want to be the ghost king who has power over a region. Whoever wants to be can do it. I only want to be reluctant to part with the world of mortals. I should be among the talented scholars and beautiful women under the waning lights." After a moment of silence, Yu Ji said calmly, "Mr. Yu is now the disciple of the Celestial Master. Pass down my order. If you see Mr. Yu, come and report immediately. I will go and greet him personally." Her tone was very calm and there was nothing wrong with her words. She had learned a lesson from the death of Meng Yan and Aoli. It was better not to let others know that she wanted to leave the demon ghost territory. Otherwise, there would be consequences. Everyone understood that no one in the demon ghost territory was worthy of the title of Celestial Master other than Bai Changchun. However, the disciple of the Celestial Master made people speculate. In the demon ghost territory, Sai Zhangfei was relatively familiar with Yu Qianqiu. He asked doubtfully, "The Mr. Yu that Madam mentioned is Mr. Yu Qianqiu?" Hearing this, everyone came to a sudden realization, but they also couldn't believe it. Under everyone's doubtful eyes, Yu Ji said with a smile, "Yes, it is Mr. Yu Qianqiu. I just received the message from the Celestial Master." At this time the Ghost King's hall exploded, and there was a lot of discussion. Sai Zhangfei happily cupped his fists and said, "Yes, I will immediately pass on the order." After saying that, he put his hand on the sword at his waist and dragged his armor out of the Ghost King's hall. Not to mention the people who knew Yu Qianqiu like Yu Ji, the other Demon Kings and Ghost King in the Demon Ghost territory became busy after receiving Bai Changchun's message. They sent their subordinates to find out who this Yu Qianqiu was. Some of them even ordered their subordinates to prepare a big gift. Most people knew Li He, but now that he was dead, not many people knew Yu Qianqiu. Since they didn't know him, they had to prepare a gift in advance. In short, after the news spread, the Demon Ghost territory became completely lively. During the day demons ran amok and at night there were many ghosts. Everything was for the unknown Yu Qianqiu. The Demon Ghost domain was a bit chaotic. If Wu Sihai from the four great clans knew about this, he would definitely not find it strange. He had long since come to a conclusion that no matter where Yu Qianqiu went, there would be some trouble. It would be strange if nothing happened, and Wu Sihai had already experienced it many times. In fact, it had to be said that the people who were preparing to send the gifts were all very wise people. They did not know that Yu Qianqiu was already thinking about how to collect protection fees from them. Yu Qianqiu would definitely be very happy to see the gifts. At this time, Yu Qianqiu was on the lake of Shuntian Island. His palm was burning with a green flame. He was refining the 100 flying swords destroyed by Li He. The clear water in the lake was just right for the swords. He had to refine them again. With his current cultivation he still couldn't fly. Without flying swords he couldn't leave Shuntian Island. He couldn't possibly row a boat or swim. Although Qin Feng had many flying swords in Utopia, they were definitely not as good as these ones that were mixed with mystic gold sand. Furthermore, if he were to collect protection fees and encountered someone who was blind, he could not possibly use Bai Changchun for such a small matter. The better the flying swords, the more useful they were. He wasn't afraid of Bai Changchun finding out. Anyway, Bai Changchun already knew the secret of the green flame, so there was no need to hide it. However, Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the room at the center of the island, suddenly opened his eyes when the balls of molten metal were being refined into flying swords skillfully and casually in the green flame on his palm. Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the room at the center of the island, suddenly opened his eyes. His soul consciousness quickly moved to the surroundings of Yu Qianqiu, who was immersed in refining the swords, but the latter was completely unaware of it. After the 100 flying swords were refined, one was returned to the scabbard on his back, and the rest were returned to the storage bag. He originally wanted to go to the Demon King and the Ghost King to collect the fees, but after thinking about it he felt that he should greet Bai Changchun first. He obediently arrived outside the house where Bai Changchun was sitting, bowed and said, "Master, disciple doesn't have enough spirit stones to plant the lac flame profound fruit, tomorrow. Can disciple go?" Before he could finish he was interrupted by Bai Changchun. "I've already told you before, you can ask for spirit stones from any Demon King or Ghost King in the Demon Ghost domain. In the future you don't have to look for me for such matters. You can handle it yourself. In short, you can't lose the lac flame profound fruit." Disciple understands, disciple will do it now. Yu Qianqiu respectfully retreated. After walking a little further, with a chong sound, his sword was unsheathed, turning into a stream of light that carried him far away. Only after flying far away did the respect on Yu Qianqiu's face turn into a wretched smile. He looked at the demon ghost domain in the distance, which was densely packed with worry. He stepped on the sword, waved his sleeves, put his hands behind his back and increased his flying speed. He was a little impatient. Chapter 296. Flying out of the 1,000-mile lake, he immediately felt like he was in another world. The sunlight from before was already far behind him, and the dark and strange atmosphere caused the temperature to drop a few degrees. Yu Qianqiu stood on his sword and stopped in the air, looking around with a strange expression. He was anxious and didn't know where he had gone. Between the mountains, there was an abundance of vegetation, ancient trees and wisteria. All kinds of ancient and strange plants were densely packed together. Based on his previous life's logic, it was hard to understand why there was such an abundance of vegetation in this place that never saw the sun. All kinds of strange cries came from all directions, and the strange atmosphere reminded him of the first time he came to the demon ghost region with the various sects for training. At that time, some people wanted to fly in the demon ghost region with their swords, but before they could fly far, they were swallowed by the red light that suddenly appeared. Just thinking about it made him feel uneasy. Although he was here under the name of Bai Changchun, no one here knew him. What if some demon or ghost made a mistake and killed him? Safety first. Yu Qianqiu lowered his flying altitude and slowly flew about 2 to 3 meters above the ground. He carefully flew through the dark forest. The vegetation that passed by him was clearly lush, but it gave people a feeling of lifelessness, which made him even more careful. After flying for a short while, Yu Qianqiu suddenly stopped. His nostrils flared and he smelled a rich fragrance. It should be the fragrance of a flower. Could it be that his luck was so good that he encountered some rare spirit grass the moment he arrived? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. His body flashed and he passed through a gap between the vines. He flew his sword towards the source of the fragrance, and went deeper into the forest. The fragrance became stronger, and the strange noises gradually lessened. Before he saw the spirit grass that he had imagined, he first heard a series of pi pi pa 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 sounds of fighting. That's right, it should be the sound of fighting. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment. He placed his feet on the sword and squatted down gently. He nestled on the sword and slowly flew towards the place where the fight was taking place. The way he flew on the sword was indeed not very pleasing to look at. It felt like he was a thief. After flying for a short distance, a beautiful bright yellow suddenly appeared in front of him. Huge yellow flowers rose from the ground. Just the flowers alone were like huge millstones, and they were as tall as a person. That alluring fragrance was coming from the flowers. Yu Qianqiu was quite shocked. He had never thought that there would be such a large flower in this world. It was simply inconceivable. As expected of the devil domain, there were all sorts of strange things. Peach Blossom, I think you should just follow me. Hee. A burst of strange laughter came, followed by a clear woman's laughter and scolding. You dare to have ideas on this fairy. Old Monster Teng, aren't you afraid that Grandma Teng will pull out your root of life? Fairy? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Could it be that there were beauties here? He was no longer in the mood to appreciate the huge yellow flowers. Instead, he used the big yellow flowers as a cover and moved towards the place where the fight was taking place. After getting close, he hid behind a yellow flower and secretly peeked at the fight not far away with shifty eyes. In a spacious area, green whip shadows and pink flower shadows danced in the air. An old man stood motionless. He was covered with rattan branches, but this was not the strangest thing. Several rattan whips stretched out from his back, making whooshing sounds. His opponent was a pink-clothed woman. Her graceful figure danced in the shadows of the whip, and her slender fingers constantly scattered peach blossoms in front of her to protect her body. Occasionally she could also shoot branches at her opponent. Damn it. So it was a fight between two fairies. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows disapprovingly, but he still watched patiently. This was the first time he saw fairies fighting. He watched with great interest, but he did not notice that a big yellow flower behind him had quietly turned around. The petals, which were already big, were slowly opening up, facing Yu Qianqiu as if it was opening its bloody mouth. Yu Qianqiu was still hiding behind another yellow flower, peeking with his butt up, completely unaware of the movement behind him. Hard work paid off. After the pink-clothed woman flipped around a few times, Yu Qianqiu finally saw the woman's pretty face. She was wearing a palace dress and her gauze dress fluttered in the wind. She was indeed a beautiful fairy. However, this female fairy did not seem to be a match for the old monster. Every time she released a protective petal, it would be smashed by the old monster's rattan whip. The branches that she shot out were also easily broken by the old monster's extra rattan whip. The two of them were not on the same level at all. The old monster was clearly teasing the demoness with ease, but the demoness was frightened and panting. She was so tired that she was sweating profusely and panting. Peach Blossom, I advise you not to resist pointless. What's wrong with obeying me? The old monster cackled. The rattan vines that stretched out from behind him made him look like a spider in a spider's web. Although the demoness was at her wit's end, she still managed to catch her breath and said with a smile, If you want me to obey you, that's fine, but I'm not going to be a servant. Old monster Teng, I'll be yours the moment you kill Teng Pa. I'm afraid you won't dare. Who doesn't know that you're famous for being afraid of your wife? As soon as these words came out, the old monster could not laugh anymore. Instead, he felt embarrassed and angry. He shouted, it's your fortune that I like you. Today you have to obey me even if you don't want to. As he said that, the rattan whip became fiercer and fiercer. The female fairy was already in a precarious situation. A certain person hiding behind the yellow flower finally understood the reason and could not help but snicker. It turned out that even a fairy would find a mistress behind her wife's back. Yu Qianshou pinched his chin with one hand and considered whether he should go out and save the damsel in distress. As he was pondering, he suddenly cried out, F***CK. A yellow shadow flashed and his vision turned black. He was already trapped inside something. Yu Qianshou immediately threw a few punches, but with his cultivation he was unable to break the thing that trapped him. Then, in the darkness, a few more things that were as tough as ropes wrapped around him and tightened around him. There was even one that wrapped around his neck and a stinky liquid sprayed on his body. His strange cry immediately disturbed the two fighting fairies. The two demons temporarily stopped and retreated. They looked at the yellow flower that was wrapped up not far away and saw that it was violently shaking. The female fairy, who was panting, frowned. Just as she took a step forward, she stopped and looked back at the old monster. From the looks of it, it was obvious that he wanted to go over and rescue her, but he was afraid of being ambushed. The old monster snorted coldly and said, "Where did this reckless junior come from? You actually dare to pry into this old man's privacy." As he spoke, a vine whip behind him pierced straight towards the yellow flower. Right at this moment, the yellow flower suddenly exploded with a bang. Rays of sharp, cold light shot out from inside and shot into the sky. The yellow flower was instantly torn into pieces. Pa. **CK. This is a man-eating flower. Yu Qianshou jumped out from inside and repeatedly spat out the thing that entered his mouth. He didn't know what it was, but it didn't taste good. Even the gallbladder was almost spat out. He wiped the stinky and slippery liquid off his face. Before he could finish speaking, he saw the vine whip attacking him and stabbing towards his chest. Yu Qianshou's first reaction was to grab the vine whip that was stabbing towards his chest. The two ends of the whip, one human and one demon, immediately began to fight. How refreshing, it's actually a human late-stage core formation cultivator. Strange. Little child, you actually managed to break into this place. With the old monster's cultivation, he naturally couldn't see through Yu Qianshou's cultivation. However, as soon as the two sides fought, he immediately felt it. The old monster clicked his tongue and laughed. Legend has it that human flesh is incomparably delicious. This old man has never eaten it before. This time I'm in luck. Hearing the old monster say this, the female fairy also looked at Yu Qianshou with a face full of surprise. How could someone break into this place? This was the center of the demon domain. Shameless boasting. A mere mid-stage nascent soul old monster dares to speak such arrogant words. You actually want to eat me? This old man thinks that you're tired of living. Yu Qianshou sneered. With the vine whip in his hand, the other party saw through his cultivation. Naturally, he also saw through the other party's cultivation. He wasn't even afraid of mid-stage tribulation-passing cultivators, so why would he be afraid of a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator? What an insolent child, he. The old monster looked up to the sky and laughed. The vine whip in Yu Qianshou's hand suddenly retracted. Yu Qianshou immediately used all his strength to pull it back. Unfortunately, his cultivation wasn't as high as the old monster's, so he was dragged by the vine whip and slid down the ground, creating a trench. Chapter 297. The old demon was obviously afraid that Yu Qianqiu would let go. The vine whip in his hand suddenly grew longer and wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's wrist. Once it was pulled up, it moved faster and faster. Yu Qianqiu looked at the vine whip wrapped around his wrist and narrowed his eyes. His expression was calm. The old demon laughed wildly. The vine whip behind him covered the sky and wrapped around Yu Qianqiu. Cut. Yu Qianqiu's hands moved with the sword incantation and he let out a fierce shout. The cold lights that had broken through the yellow man-eating flowers and flew towards the horizon immediately flashed back and mercilessly whistled towards the countless vines that stretched out. With a burst of crackling sounds, a pile of vines immediately fell to the ground. Ah! The vine whips were originally connected to the old demon's body. This slash immediately caused the old demon to scream miserably. The vine whips that were mostly broken retracted. The old demon said in horror, "It's a flying sword. Impossible. How can there be so many flying swords?" Not only him but the female demon was also shocked. She had never seen or heard of someone who could control so many flying swords at the same time. They were the rising stars of the demon ghost domain. They lived in the center of the demon ghost domain and had never seen anyone, let alone someone who could control so many flying swords. It should be known that demon ghosts rarely used flying swords. They used all kinds of weapons. Only humans would use flying swords. Not to mention, ordinary people couldn't come to the center of the demon ghost domain. Naturally, the two demons had never seen it before. The flying swords cut through the countless vines and immediately returned to Yu Qianqiu's side. More than 100 flying swords danced around him, and a cold light lingered in this lush greenery. It was a spectacular scene with extraordinary momentum. Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly pulled off the vine that bound his wrist and cut off the connection with the old demon. He coldly snorted and said, "A mere old demon dares to make trouble in front of me. I say you are tired of living." The old demon, who had suffered a loss, angrily shouted, "Hey! Ignorant junior, how dare you be so arrogant in my demon ghost region? I'll show you how powerful this old man is." With a wave of his hands, the ground shook and countless vines burst out of the ground, crazily sweeping towards Yu Qianqiu. The beautiful face of the female fairy who was watching the battle from the side immediately paled, and she was accidentally wrapped up by the vines that came sweeping over. Yu Qianqiu glanced at her indifferently and did not make any move to save her. He stared at the old monster and sneered, "In your demon domain? You actually dare to say such words in front of me? You've got guts." Even when he was with Bai Changchun, he had never said such words. Now that he heard an old monster say it, he naturally found it funny. Using the finger-driving sword art, a flying sword lifted him a few meters off the ground. The vines that were trying to wrap around him were immediately cut down by the other flying swords. The old monster's formation was indeed frightening. There seemed to be an endless number of vines spreading out from the ground, densely surrounding the open space. They constantly whistled, whipped, and stabbed at Yu Qianqiu from all directions. However, Yu Qianqiu did not panic at all. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and stood a few meters above the ground on his flying sword. He sneered, "Old monster, I want to see if your vines are endless. Today this old man will cut you down until your vitality is greatly damaged." Among the dancing vines, a cold light flashed like lightning. They were extremely fast. If one came they would be cut down. If two came they would be cut down. No matter how many came, the nearly 100 flying swords could deal with them easily. They did not give the vines a chance to get close. Originally, according to Yu Qianqiu's temper, he wanted to burn all the vines with a green fire. However, ever since he modified the Guiyuan sword art, it was the first time he had used it so happily. Finally, his efforts were put to use. Therefore he suppressed the thought of using the green fire. However, the old monster was in a bit of a predicament. It was not that his cultivation was inferior to Yu Qianqiu's, but the sword art that Yu Qianqiu cultivated was simply his nemesis. No matter how many vines he moved like the wind, Yu Qianqiu's sword moved like lightning and broke through his array of vines with ease. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with his arms crossed and had a mocking expression, the old monster felt that he could not take it anymore. If this continued, it would really be as Yu Qianqiu said. He would definitely be cut down until his vitality was greatly damaged. There was no other way. This kid's sword art was his nemesis. The only thing he could do now was to leave first. A trace of resentment flashed across the old monster's face. He said, "Little kid, don't be too proud. This demon domain is not a place for you to be arrogant. This old man has something to do, so I will leave first. I will find you another day to settle the score." With that said, the dense vines in the surroundings all burrowed back into the ground. In a few blinks of an eye they were all gone. The old demon turned around and scurried into the forest not far behind him. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He sneered and said, "Old shameless thing. You are really shameless. You can't win so you run. You even dare to say nice words. I will let you run." With a point of the driving sword art, the flying swords immediately swarmed towards the escaping old monster. The old monster turned his head and was shocked. His 10 fingers immediately turned into 10 thick vine whips to block the flying swords. They quickly tangled with the flying swords. The vine whips formed by his 10 fingers were really powerful. The flying swords actually had a hard time cutting them. However, the old monster was still crying out in pain. Yu Qianqiu flew away on his flying sword. He was too lazy to fight with the old monster. Under his control, the flying swords shot through the gaps between the 10 thick vine whips, focusing on the old monster's body. The vine whips were thick and could be resisted. However, they were also clumsy. They simply could not stop so many flying swords from entering. A few holes immediately appeared on the old monster's body. Thick green liquid flowed out. The old monster screamed again and again. Suddenly, he let out a loud roar and let the flying swords pierce his body. The 10 vine whips in his arms broke off and shot out, knocking away many flying swords. The old monster's aura was very shocking. He fiercely attacked Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. The old monster was going all out. A group of flying swords immediately flashed back to block. The flying sword under his feet flashed and carried him up into the sky to avoid the vine whips. After flashing into the sky, Yu Qianqiu immediately realized something was wrong. He saw that after the old monster forced him away, it had shrunk into a pile. Its head and limbs were all gone. They had all shrunk into its body. Its body had turned into a pile of vines on the ground. Yu Qianqiu swooped down and pointed with his finger. The group of flying swords surged forward and picked up the pile of vines. The old monster had already disappeared. A hole had appeared below. He quickly released his divine sense to investigate and immediately felt a ball of vitality escaping from the hole. Yu Qianqiu quickly glanced at the 10 thick vines on the ground. This old monster was obviously learning from a lizard and cutting off its tail to survive. He, on the other hand, was cutting off his fingers to survive. The old monster could escape underground. "Wanna run? Not so easy." Yu Qianqiu shouted and pointed with his sword. Dozens of flying swords flew into the hole at lightning speed. Following the guidance of his divine sense, they chased after the old monster. A moment later, a mournful scream came from the hole. Clearly the old monster had been severely injured again. However, because Yu Qianqiu's cultivation wasn't high enough, the range of his divine sense was limited. In addition, it went too deep into the ground, which more or less affected the release of his divine sense. The flying swords were no longer able to continue chasing after the old monster. "Brat, you will regret this." The old monster's voice was faintly coming from the hole. "Regret?" Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. He raised his hand and called back dozens of flying swords from the hole. Close to 100 cold gleams twined around his body. His expression was indeed a little ugly. "I didn't provoke you, but you provoked me first. How can I let you go?" Yu Qianqiu coldly glanced at the female monster that was still tightly bound by the vines. He pointed with 2 fingers and a few cold gleams shot out, removing the vines on the female monster. After the female monster was freed, she looked around. Suddenly, she was surrounded by dozens of flying swords. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air and said in a deep voice, "Where is the main body of that old monster? Don't tell me you don't know. If you don't want to die, tell me quickly." No matter how far the plants and other spiritual monsters ran, they couldn't run away like animals and other spiritual monsters. They couldn't run away from the ground. This was something Yu Qianqiu knew, so he asked. The beautiful seductress in pink clothes glanced at the rattan that had fallen all around. Her gaze finally fell on the 10 thick rattan that had fallen off. Her bright eyes lit up and she immediately bowed to Yu Qianqiu. "Mister, that rattan monster was severely injured by Mr. It must have returned to its nest under the cliff of the western mountain. This little demon is willing to lead the way for Mr. Yu Qianqiu nodded and put away the flying swords that surrounded her. Suddenly he said, "Wait a moment." He rode his sword and flew to the front of the hundreds of large yellow man-eating flowers. The flying sword that was circling around his body flashed out, and wherever the cold light passed, the man-eating flowers were shot into pieces. What was strange was that when these man-eating flowers were destroyed, they actually let out ear-piercing geo-geo sounds. Yu Qianqiu frowned when he heard this. He waved his hand and the flying sword flew out again. He only stopped after cutting down all the man-eating flowers from their roots. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of rare man-eating flowers had been completely cut down. He flew back on his sword and said coldly to the female monster, "Lead the way." Chapter 298. The two of them headed west. Yu Qianshou rode on his sword and followed behind the female demon. That female demon's graceful figure did not touch the ground, only stepping on the grass. She looked light as a feather, but her speed was extremely fast, making Yu Qianshou feel extremely amazed. She was literally flying on the grass. She seemed even more graceful than flying on grass. Her slender figure, pink clothes, and even her shoes were petite pink. The grass swayed with her feet and carried her far away. Her hair flew in the air and her pink clothes matched the grass. She was very beautiful. Grass elves really had a unique advantage. Yu Qianshou suddenly asked, "What kind of monster is that old demon?" The female demon replied timidly, "He is an ancient vine spirit that has cultivated for 1,000 years. People around here call him Old Monster Teng." She wasn't a match for the vine monster, and now the man in front of her could even beat the vine monster into fleeing. He even wanted to chase it to its lair. With this ability, it was naturally not a problem for him to deal with her, so it wasn't strange for her to be afraid. Oh, no wonder he uses vines as weapons. The female demon's words confirmed his guess. He looked at the slender figure and said with interest, "I heard Old Monster Ting call you Peach Blossom. Could you be a peach blossom tree spirit?" The female demon softly said, "Mister's guess is correct. I am a peach blossom tree spirit that has cultivated for 1,000 years. Peach Blossom, you and that old demon have both cultivated for 1,000 years. Why aren't you a match for him?" Yu Qianshou asked. "Although he and I have both cultivated for 1,000 years, he transformed into a human 200 years ago. I just reached the nascent soul stage not long ago and am not good at fighting. Naturally, I am not a match for him." The Peach Blossom demon replied. Yu Qianshou nodded slightly. He had heard about this from Bai Suzhen. In the demon race, it was even more difficult for grass and wood spirits to cultivate. Unlike animals, it was extremely difficult for grass and wood spirits to cultivate. Without intelligence, how could grass and wood spirits cultivate? Therefore, it was even more difficult for them to become spirits. In order to reach the stage where they could transform into humans, all demons had to reach the nascent soul stage. Most of the plants would eventually wither and die without being able to gather their spiritual wisdom to cultivate. Even if they could cultivate, it would be difficult for them to transform into a human form even after thousands of years of cultivation. Among human cultivators, even those at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage would die of old age. As the saying goes, where there are gains there are losses. Although the heavens were unfair, they were actually quite fair. Compared to humans, demons, and ghosts, plant spirits were the most difficult to cultivate. However, as long as they could break through to the deity transformation final stage, it was said that the heavenly tribulations were the weakest, and they would almost always be able to ascend to the immortal realm. "Since you can't beat him, why didn't you agree to Monster Ting's request?" Yu Qianshou smiled. "If I didn't refuse, I would have died a long time ago," the Peach Blossom said in a low voice. Yu Qianshou asked curiously, "Why is that?" His thoughts went astray. Could it be that Monster Ting knew some method to absorb yin to replenish yang? Could it be that he would suck his mating partner dry? How did the two plant demons mate? The Peach Blossom bit her lip and said, "Sir, you should be careful. Monster Ting has a wife called Tingpa. Her cultivation is higher than Monster Ting's. She has reached the nascent soul stage and is the subordinate of the Monster King, Miss Mu." Although she didn't answer him directly, Yu Qianshou understood. He reckoned that Tingpa was a jealous woman and couldn't tolerate her husband having other women. He thought for a while and asked, "What kind of demon is the Demon King Madame Mu? Is she the Monster King in charge of this place?" Miss Mu is a magnolia demon. Her cultivation has reached the tribulation stage. She is the monster king in charge of this place. Oh, Yu Qianqiu said. He thought, why are there only plant spirits here? Looking around he understood. The plants here were much more exuberant than other places in the demon ghost territory. It was a good place for plant spirits. Speaking of Miss Mu, he thought of the 3 saints of Lingwu who had been killed. One of them, Red Lady, was definitely a coquettish and beautiful demon. He just didn't know what Miss Mu looked like. As he thought about it, an idea flashed in his mind. Don't I have a demon-revealing mirror? I didn't use it before because Bai Sujin is also a demon. Isn't it suitable in the demon ghost territory? Let's try it. Yu Qianqiu immediately took out the delicate demon-revealing mirror. From the chain on it, it could be seen that this treasure should be hung around the neck. After wearing it around his neck, he looked at the peach blossom in front of him with the mirror. He didn't find anything. After he injected his divine sense into it, he finally found a magical effect. It turned out that he used his divine sense to look through the demon-revealing mirror. The peach blossom seen by his divine sense in the mirror was no longer a graceful woman. A peach tree full of flowers appeared clearly in the demon-revealing mirror. A divine craftsman was indeed a divine craftsman. The things he made were really magical. Yu Qianqiu sighed. After withdrawing his divine sense from the mirror, he felt that the small bronze mirror hanging on his neck was a little ugly. It was no different from the longevity lock hanging on the neck of a secular child. So he stuffed the mirror into the lapel on his chest and injected his divine sense into the peach blossom again. Fortunately, it could still show the original shape of the peach blossom. Good stuff. He touched his chest and found that the demon-revealing mirror was hanging there. Along the way they constantly encountered some of the largest groups in the demon ghost realm. They were the blood wolves that Yu Qianqiu had seen when he first came here. This kind of fierce animal was not afraid of death. Yu Qianqiu had dealt with them before. He knew that if they attracted companions, although he was not afraid, it would be a troublesome thing. So without saying anything he killed every wolf he saw. He didn't even give them a chance to make a sound. This action made the peach blossom a little frightened. After coming out of the dense forest, the front suddenly opened up. A few hundred meters away, a tall stone mountain seemed to have been split into 2 halves. One half was intact and the other half seemed to have been moved away. Green vines spread everywhere at the foot of the mountain, covering the entire foot of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu pointed to the mountain wall in front of him and asked, "This is the West Mountain cliff you mentioned? Is this the hiding place of the old demon?" "Yes." The peach blossom looked around timidly and said, "Sir, please be careful. If the vine woman is here it will be troublesome." TSK. This stone mountain seems to have been split by someone. The power of nature is really amazing. It is not something that can be done by human beings. Yu Qianqiu looked at the smooth stone wall and sighed. He looked like he was looking at the scenery. As for the vine woman, he was not afraid of her. Since she was the subordinate of the demon king who was in charge of this place, she would not dare to do anything to the disciple of Bai Changchun. "Sir, the formation of this stone wall is not the power of nature. It is indeed the work of human beings. It was split by a sword," the peach blossom reminded him softly. "Ah." Yu Qianqiu immediately opened his mouth and was stunned. This stone wall was probably 700 or 800 meters high and 300 or 400 meters wide. Moreover, it was a mountain of pure stone. Could someone split the whole mountain with a sword? Isn't this too inconceivable? He asked in disbelief. It was split by a sword? That's impossible. Did you see it with your own eyes? I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but this is something that everyone in this area knows. The peach blossom looked around guiltily, bit her lip, and slowly said while looking at the stone wall, "It is said that more than 1,000 years ago, the Blood Wolf clan was the most powerful existence in the Demon Ghost region. At that time, the Blood Wolf Emperor had broken through to the soul formation stage, and he had the largest group in the entire Demon Ghost region. Thus, he was disloyal and did not want to be restrained by the Torture Master. As a result, he fought with the Torture Master here and was killed by the Torture Master. This stone wall was split by the Torture Master's sword during that battle. The other half of the mountain was shattered, and the Blood Wolf Emperor was buried under the rubble. If you remove the green vines all over the field, you will find that it is full of rubble." Yu Qianqiu looked at the half of the stone wall, a little confused. More than 1,000 years ago? At that time, Bai Changchun should have already taken over as the Torture Master of the Demon Ghost region. He swallowed and asked, "That battle, the Torture Master you are talking about is a mortal master Bai who is now on Shentian Island?" Yes, Immortal Master Bai. After that battle, I heard that Immortal Master Bai was angered and then... The peach blossom seemed to realize that she had said too much. She looked around guiltily and did not dare to continue. However, Yu Qianqiu was eager to know what Bai Changchun did after that, so he urged, "What happened after that? Tell me quickly." He urged, but the peach blossom did not dare to speak. In the end, after being threatened by Yu Qianqiu, she could not help but say, "After that battle, the torture master was furious. All the Blood Wolf clan members with a bit of cultivation, more than 400,000 of them, were all killed by the torture master in one night. At that time, there was a demon and a ghost in the demon ghost region who had also reached the soul formation stage, but because of that incident they were also implicated. The torture master said that they were the ones who started it and wanted the two soul formation stage cultivators to kill themselves to atone for their crimes. Of course, the demon and the ghost refused, so the torture master fought the two of them alone and killed them. From then on, except for the torture master, there were no other soul formation stage cultivators in the entire demon ghost region. Mister, this is all I know. I really don't know anything else." Yu Qianqiu stared blankly at the stone wall and nodded his head. So this mountain was Bai Changchun's masterpiece, and it was actually split apart by a single sword strike. His cultivation was just too terrifying, killing more than 400,000 blood wolves in one night. Ruthless. Ruthless beyond belief. Also, one person killed two soul formation stage cultivators at the same time. Those were two soul formation stage cultivators. The scene of that battle was so thrilling that it was hard to describe. One soul formation stage cultivator killed two soul formation stage cultivators at the same time. Wow. He was really powerful and ruthless. No wonder all the demons and ghosts in the demon ghost region trembled in fear at the mention of Bai Changchun's name and didn't even dare to speak loudly. Who would dare to speak loudly in front of such a killing god? No wonder Healy said that he was merciless towards demons and ghosts and killed without mercy. He really wasn't joking. This immortal master Bai is really amazing, hee. Yu Qianqiu squeezed out a smile. After knowing about Bai Changchun's glorious deeds, he was really scared. He only hoped that he didn't see through his little tricks. If he angered this killing god with his cultivation level, he might not even be able to escape. Chapter 299. However, after thinking about it, he understood Bai Changchun's difficulties. Think about it, in this vast demon realm, demons and ghosts ran amok. If there was no one to restrain them, what would happen? If all these things broke into the human world, then the so-called cultivation world would not be able to stop such a huge force. At that point, the human world would be in chaos. To restrain these demons and ghosts, it would be useless to reason with them. Often, iron and blood methods would be more effective. Bai Changchun was in charge of the demon realm. It seemed that he had killed countless people, but in fact he had saved more lives. After thinking it through, Yu Qianqiu's fear turned into admiration. Think about it, other soul formation stage cultivators did not want to be tied down by anything, but Bai Changchun abandoned his family and ended up being tied down by this demon realm for nearly 2,000 years. His responsibility was great, and his actions were respectable. Yu Qianqiu was a little depressed. He had racked his brains to obtain the position of punishment envoy, but once he really took it, the burden on his shoulders would be immense. To put it nicely, he would have to shoulder the welfare of all living beings in the world. Whatever, he would get it first. If it didn't work, he would find someone else to take over. Yu Qianqiu thought it through in a blink of an eye. He looked around and asked, "Peach Blossom, where is the real body of the old demon hiding?" "I don't know the specific location, but it must be hidden in the green vines under this stone cliff." Peach Blossom said a little uneasily. "I see." Yu Qianqiu frowned. The green vines all looked the same. Who knew which one was under it? Without thinking too much, his figure flashed and he flew above the green vines on his sword. He released his divine sense to check each place. He believed that this old demon who had cultivated for 1,000 years must be a little different from the other green vines. After checking, he was shocked. As Peach Blossom said, there were stones of different sizes under the green vines. It was probably the result of the half of the stone mountain being shattered. The green vines all grew out of the cracks in the stones. Even if he found the hiding place of the old demon, if it didn't come out, he would really have to spend some effort to dig it out. Starting from the place where the two of them were standing, he swept back and forth with his divine sense. After a few rounds, he found something wrong under the stone wall. At this time, the green vines within a radius of tens of meters grew from one tree. It would be strange if they didn't have such a huge branch. "Old demon, get out here." Yu Qianqiu stared down and shouted. The other flying swords that he had put into the storage bag flew out again and danced around him. However, after calling a few times, there was no response from below. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. More than a dozen flying swords shot out and slashed at the entangled old vine below. After slashing, he was even more sure that he found the right place. It often took a few slashes to cut off a vine. If it wasn't a demon, ordinary green vines wouldn't be so hard. Alright, you don't want to come out, right? Fine, as long as you don't feel bad, I will cut slowly. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and sent out more than a dozen flying swords. Suddenly, there was a continuous sound of ding dang dang dang. Dozens of flying swords rose and fell and slashed continuously. He was standing in the air watching the show with interest. Suddenly, there was a loud shout from afar. Who is it? How dare you hurt my body? Stop right now. The voice was sharp and anxious. It was a woman's voice. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Did he make a mistake? The flying swords that were slashing wildly below returned to his side. After a while, a figure quickly flew over. He saw an old woman appear in front of him. She was dressed in hemp clothes and looked old. Her hair was tied up with a few green vines and she held a cane in her hand. Who are you? I have no grievances with you. Why did you hurt my body? The old woman pointed at him and shouted angrily. Peach Blossom, who was standing in the distance, saw the old woman coming and quietly retreated into the forest. Yu Qianqiu looked at the vine that had been chopped into a mess and asked doubtfully, You are Tingpa? Since you know it's me, then you are deliberately looking for trouble. Tingpa held the cane in her hand and was about to attack. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly waved his hand and said, It's a misunderstanding. It's definitely a misunderstanding. I didn't do it on purpose. Old woman, you have to avenge me. At this moment, old monster Ting appeared out of nowhere. He raised his palms that had lost all 10 fingers and looked pitiful. Yu Qianqiu looked back and his expression sank. He sneered and said, Old thing, not hiding anymore? Tengpa looked at her man's palms and was so angry that her body trembled. You did it? Umph. Old woman, don't be anxious. First, find out who did it. That's right, your man is looking for a concubine outside behind your back. To think that you are still so protective of him. I even brought the victim who was bullied by your husband. Peach Blossom HM? Peach Blossom? Yu Qianqiu called out a few times but did not respond. He turned his head and looked around. That female demon had already disappeared. She had actually abandoned him and fled. Yu Qianqiu was not angry. Instead, he sneered and said, What a little demon who doesn't know what's good for her. He then pointed at old monster Teng and Tingpo and said, And you guys, I think you are all tired of living. When Tingpa heard Yu Qianqiu say that her man was looking for a concubine, she immediately turned her gaze to old monster Teng. However, old monster Teng's eyes flashed. He shouted, Old woman, what are you hesitating for? Let's work together and kill this little thief. After saying this, he raised his arms. His missing 10 fingers immediately turned into 2 long whips that were as thick as a person's thighs. He ruthlessly smashed them toward Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on his sword. Yu Qianqiu sneered and said, Hee hee. Very good. Very good. He immediately dodged to the side. The 2 long whips missed. With a loud bang, the whips smashed the 2 rocks below him into pieces. Then he shot up like a snake and swept across the sky at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu jumped a few meters from the flying sword. The 2 long whips chased after him and brushed past his feet. The flying sword below him circled around and caught Yu Qianqiu again. Yu Qianqiu flicked his hand and pointed. Sword shadows danced and flashed. Almost 100 flying swords shot toward old monster Teng. Old monster Teng was shocked and withdrew his 2 whips to protect himself. The 2 whips twisted and flicked wildly, immediately knocking away many flying swords. However, there were still many flying swords that passed through. Old monster Teng was so frightened that he cried out. He used his 2 whips as crutches and propped himself up into the sky. Ting Po's eyes flashed. No one knew what she was thinking. She saw that her man was being forced into such a state, but she still did not help. Go! Yu Qianqiu lightly shouted with his fingers. The flying swords that were dodged immediately reversed and shot back toward old monster Teng. The latter screamed and dodged in the air. Unfortunately, his speed was slowed down by the 2 huge whips in his hands. A few flying swords still nailed into his thighs. Old monster Ting let out a miserable cry in the air. Separate. Yu Qianqiu lightly sang with his fingers again. The flying swords that were nailed into old monster Teng's thighs twisted wildly. They pierced through his thighs and shot in all directions. Old monster Teng let out another miserable cry. One of his thighs was cut off by the flying swords and fell from the sky. A green liquid exploded from the base of his thighs and slowly dripped down in the air. My leg. Old Monster Ting cried out in sorrow. His arms that had turned into two whips went limp. He fell beside Ting Pa and supported himself with one leg. He turned around and shouted angrily, "Stupid old woman, do you really want me to die in front of you?" It's coming again. A group of flying swords circled in the air and shot toward him again. Ting Pa coldly snorted. After all, this was her man. She finally made her move. She swung the vine staff in her hand, and it crashed into the group of flying swords. Ding ding dang dang sounds rang out. The flying swords were immediately scattered. Then the vine staff spun around and whistled toward Yu Qianqiu. As for the remaining few flying swords, Ting Pa unhurriedly untied the rattan belt around her waist. She raised her hand and shook it. With a whoosh, it turned into a long whip. Ting Pa swung it out like a snake and swept it towards the few flying swords that were shooting at her. Chapter 300. The whip rose into the air like a divine dragon swinging its tail. It was extremely nimble and created several whip shadows that clashed with the flying swords. Dang dang, sounds were heard as the flying swords were immediately deflected away. Yu Qianqiu was startled by the whistling vine staff. The vine staff was like Jiang Ziya's god-beating whip. He quickly dodged it with his flying sword. Although he managed to dodge it, the strong wind brought by the vine staff made his clothes flutter. If he was hit by it, he would be smashed down from the sky. The vine staff missed its target, so it rolled and bounced up. It aimed at its target and smashed down again. Yu Qianqiu immediately summoned his flying sword to fight it. Unfortunately, the flying sword could not win at all. The vine staff had probably been refined into a high-grade magic tool. Someone was immediately chased by the vine staff and was forced to run around in the air. Old Monster Ting, who was missing a leg, laughed sinisterly on the ground. A new leg slowly grew out from his broken leg in a very disgusting manner. Although the new leg had grown out, Old Monster Ting's face was a lot paler. This was obviously an action that consumed a lot of yuan qi. Gather. Yu Qianqiu shouted while he was hiding. The scattered flying swords quickly flew over with his two fingers as the center. They gathered into the shape of an umbrella and rotated in the air 2 meters away from his fingertips. The vine staff smashed down again. Yu Qianqiu waved his finger and the umbrella sword shield immediately blocked it. Bang! The two collided and the sword shield was destroyed on the spot. The vine staff flipped and bounced up. It paused for a moment in the air before smashing down again. Damn! Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry and pointed with his 2 fingers. The 99 flying swords once again gathered into a sword shield to block. The 2 sides collided and a bang sound was heard again. Thus, a dramatic scene appeared in the air. One kept smashing down from all angles while the other kept blocking from all angles. Immediately, Yu Qianqiu found himself in a very difficult situation. His 2 fingers continuously gathered the shattered flying swords and used them as shields. He blocked left and right in the air, blocking in all directions. Fortunately, the 2 demons had not reached the tribulation stage yet. Otherwise, Yu Qianqiu would not have been able to withstand the opponent's attacks. Resisting head-on in the air like this caused his true essence to be rapidly consumed. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly took out a few qi-returning pills and placed them in his mouth like he was chewing beans, swallowing them dry to recover his true essence. His face became more and more gloomy, and from time to time 2 jumping green flames flashed in his eyes. It was just that he couldn't see it. He probably wanted to use the green flames that he had been suppressing. It seemed that he had to put aside the idea of practicing the Imperial Sword technique. I didn't expect a core formation cultivator to be able to use the sword control technique so skillfully. Ting Pa looked at the sky and couldn't help but praise. For a core formation cultivator to be able to resist the combined attacks of 2 nascent soul cultivators was already quite impressive. She then turned around and asked, "Old man, who is this young man? How did he get here? Who the hell knows who he is? I don't care so much. Let's kill him and take revenge first." Old Monster Ting said with a sinister expression. On the treetop of a nearby forest stood a woman in a pink dress. Her hair was tied up in a high bun, and her face was cold and beautiful. She appeared exceptionally noble. Behind her stood 2 women in pink clothes of the same color, but the 2 of them were far inferior to the former in terms of temperament. The 3 women silently stood on the treetop and watched the battle not far away. The hem of their dresses fluttered in the wind. Who is this young man? How did he get here? The woman with the noble temperament suddenly asked the same question as Tengpa. The woman on her right replied, "Lady, I don't know either." Tengpa suddenly felt that someone was destroying her body, so she hurried over. Tengpa didn't say anything else. The noble woman frowned and said, "That's strange. That young man seems to be having a hard time fighting. His cultivation is only at core formation. A mere core formation cultivator wouldn't even be able to enter the outskirts of the demon realm. How did he get here?" The woman on the left was confused and said, "That's right. This place isn't far from the 1,000-mile lake. Could he be from Obedient Island? Could he be the disciple of the torture envoy?" Her words were just a casual guess, but the expressions of the other two people changed drastically. The woman on the right shook her head and said, "That's impossible. The cultivation of that torture envoy is unfathomable. How could his disciple be so useless? Didn't that Heli also have the cultivation of the middle stage of passing calamity?" The noble woman's expression softened and she nodded and said, "That's right. No matter how useless the torture envoy's disciple is, his cultivation shouldn't be so weak." If Yu Qianqiu heard someone say this about him, he would definitely vomit blood in anger. Fortunately, he didn't hear it. He was fighting fiercely in the air, and the more he fought, the angrier he became. The two of them attacked him together, and he didn't even have a chance to fight back. He was constantly being suppressed. If Tengpa attacked him with her whip again, he wouldn't have been able to resist it. Finally, he couldn't play anymore. The feeling of being suppressed by someone else was very uncomfortable. His eyes were suffused with a penetrating green light, and two green flames were clearly lit up. The sword shield protecting Yu Qianqiu had just been destroyed by Tengpo's cane when a claw glowing with a demonic green light quickly passed through the flying swords and grabbed the cane, which had exhausted its momentum and was about to return to attack again. At the same time, he stretched out two fingers with his other hand, and the shattered flying swords quickly condensed and blocked Curmudgeon Teng's whip. As soon as the sword shield was destroyed, 5 claws glowing with a demonic green light immediately reached out and grabbed the tail of the cane in the same way. The flying sword completed its task, and with a swish, it turned into a cold light and flashed into Yu Qianqiu's storage bag. The moment the cane whip was grabbed by Yu Qianqiu, Curmudgeon Teng on the other end of the cane cried out, "It's scalding me, it's scalding me. Let go, little boy." His expression twitched as he swung his arm, which had turned into a cane whip. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore and he gritted his teeth, leaving a long tail of the cane in Yu Qianqiu's hand, just like the last time he broke his fingers. Tengpa looked at her old man in surprise who was jumping around and peeing, and then looked at Yu Qianqiu. The moment her cane was grabbed by Yu Qianqiu, the divine sense attached to it instantly disappeared, and she completely lost contact with the cane. Yu Qianqiu floated in the air, and the things in his hands suddenly ignited with a blue flame. When the flame was extinguished, the things in his hands turned to ashes and were blown away by the wind. The sudden appearance of the two blue flames surprised everyone nearby and in the distance. But what surprised them even more was, a smile appeared at the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth. As a disciple of Bai Changchun, someone actually dared to beat him up in the demon ghost region. The more he thought about it, the more he found it interesting. In the end, he couldn't help but laugh and say, "I didn't expect that I, Yu Qianqiu, would receive such a warm welcome from you two when I first arrived here. How can I repay you?" Ah. Chapter 301. He might not have felt anything when he said that, but to the others, it was no less than a bolt from the blue. It was enough to make them lose their minds. Yu Qianqiu's voice was not soft. The woman who stood on the treetop like a noble empress clearly heard it, but she still could not believe it. She asked in a trembling voice, "What did he say his name was?" The two women behind her turned pale. Their eyes lost focus as they mumbled weakly, "Yu Qianqiu. He's Yu Qianqiu, the disciple of the disciplinary envoy." Instantly, the noble woman's face turned ashen, and she lost all her temperament. "You're Yu Qianqiu?" Tengpo's face was filled with terror. "Who cares what his name is? He won't be leaving here alive today. Don't show any mercy, old woman. Kill him." Old Freak Ting did not learn his lesson after suffering a loss. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu had already put away his flying sword, he swung his two whips with a ferocious expression and lashed at the air. "No, stop!" A few screams rang out at the same time. Unfortunately, Old Freak Teng had already made his move. The disciple of the disciplinary envoy had already announced his name, but someone still dared to make a move. Wasn't this a death wish? It was fine if Old Freak Teng was courting death, but according to the disciplinary envoy's temper, everyone present would probably be implicated. No one would be able to escape. Teng Po was completely flustered. The 3 women on the treetop were confused. The 4 women's minds were blank. They looked on dumbly and forgot to stop old freak Teng. As the vine whips approached, Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes. Green flames surged around his body, illuminating the gloomy sky with a dazzling green brilliance. There was a person standing in the middle of the green flames. It was a very strange scene. Teng Po and the 3 women were dumbstruck, and their hearts surged with boundless sorrow. They all asked themselves, how could the punishment envoy's disciple be an ordinary person? Old freak Teng was shocked to see the strange condition on Yu Qianqiu's body. In addition to that, he heard Grandma Teng's cries from afar. He had a bad feeling about this. He was just about to pull back his whips when he saw Yu Qianqiu shoot out 2 balls of azure flames. In a moment of desperation, he retracted his whip to protect himself, wanting to deflect the incoming flames. Who would have thought that as soon as the 2 whips touched the 2 balls of green flames, it was as if the whips had been doused with kerosene. The green flames quickly spread from the tips of the whips all the way down, turning the 2 whips into ashes. Ah! Old Monster Teng let out a blood-curdling scream. How could the vine whip, which was connected to his body, withstand the pain of the azure fire? However, he hardened his heart. Before the fire reached him, his arms, which had transformed into 2 whips, once again broke off to protect himself. After losing his limbs several times, Old Monster Teng's essence was greatly damaged. He trembled in pain as he said, "Old woman, my essence is too exhausted. I can't attack anymore. Help me kill him." "Shut up." Teng Po shook her head miserably. Her face was filled with pain as the whip in her hand fell to the ground. Speechless, she knelt before Yu Qianqiu. "Old woman, you?" Old Monster Teng finally realized that something was wrong. He looked at Yu Qianqiu in horror, then at Teng Po. When the cries rang out, Yu Qianqiu immediately noticed the 3 people on the treetop. From the actions of Teng Po and the others, he could tell that his identity was no longer a secret. Yu Qianqiu withdrew the flames around his body and coldly glanced at the forest. He snorted and said, "Do you still need me to invite you over?" The 3 figures quickly flew over and knelt down as soon as they landed. The woman leading them said in fear and trepidation, "Lady Mu greets Mr. We did not know that Mr. was here. Please forgive us." "Greetings, Yao Monarch." When the woman leading them arrived, Old Monster Teng immediately knelt down and kowtowed. However, he did not expect that the person he was kowtowing to was his enemy. He was stunned. Teng Po, who was kneeling beside him, began to weep softly. The 3 women's cultivation levels were not low. From the moment they arrived to the moment they knelt down, they were so fast that Yu Qianqiu did not manage to see their faces clearly. This made Yu Qianqiu, who originally wanted to see if the 3 women were beautiful, a little depressed. He could only put away the flying sword beneath his feet and descend to the ground. He said in a deep voice, "The 3 of you get up." He did not ask Old Monster Teng or Teng Po to get up. After the 3 of them got up, they did not dare to raise their heads to look at him. Yu Qianqiu could only say again, "You are the Yao Monarch, Lady Mu? I want to see you. The 3 of you raise your heads." "This little demon is indeed Lady Mu." Lady Mu bowed. She did not dare to call herself a Yao Monarch in front of Yu Qianqiu. The 3 women slowly raised their heads. Their panicked eyes also took the opportunity to observe Yu Qianqiu. Her temperament was good and she could be considered beautiful. Unfortunately, she could not compare to Bai Suzhen. Her figure was not great either, and she could not compare to Wu Lixue and the Temptress of 100 Charms. After looking at the 3 of them, Yu Qianqiu came to this conclusion. However, this feeling of raising one's head as a Yao Monarch in the final stages of the Tribulation Transcendence was not bad. If he dared to say such words in the outside world, he would definitely be hunted down. Yu Qianqiu looked at Old Monster Teng and Teng Po with slight disappointment. His gaze gradually turned cold. It was time to settle the score with these 2. He slowly walked in front of the 2 and said coldly, "Old Monster Teng, have I seen you before?" Old Monster Teng shivered and said fearfully, "No, no." "Then, have I offended you before?" "No." "Since I have never seen you before and have never offended you, why did you want to kill me when I saw you fighting with that peach blossom spirit?" "I was confused. I was confused for a moment. I didn't know it was Mr. Please forgive me, Mr. Old Monster Teng kowtowed repeatedly. In fact, he still did not know who this Yu Qianqiu was. However, the actions of Lady Mu and the others were very clear. He could only blame himself for being obsessed with that peach blossom spirit for the past few days. He did not even pay attention to the most important matters in the demon domain. Lady Mu and the others stared at him in unison. So, it was this guy who had caused all this trouble. But of all people he had to provoke by Changchun's disciple. Wasn't this the same as dragging everyone to die with him? One could imagine the expressions of the women at the moment. I didn't provoke you. You provoked me first. I'm not wrongly accusing you, am I? Yu Qianzhou's tone became gloomy. His eyes shone with a green light, causing Lady Mu and the others to shudder. No. Old Monster Teng replied weakly. Then he continued to kowtow and beg for mercy. Yu Qianzhou's green eyes turned to Teng Pa. He snorted coldly and said, I have just cultivated a set of sword kinesis techniques. Since I met you two, I can use it to practice. Do you two think that I am no match for you? We don't dare. No. The two of them kowtowed in unison. Yu Qianzhou did not care whether the two of them were telling the truth or not. He stretched out his palm and a ball of green flames burst out. A powerful heat suddenly spread in all directions. The two of them immediately sat on the ground, feeling suffocated. Lady Mu and the others could not help but take a few steps back in shock. Their expressions were uncertain. They all had the same thought. What a powerful flame. Even with their cultivation at the end of the tribulation stage, they could not get close to it. If I wanted to kill you too, it would be as easy as flipping my hand. Yu Qianzhou said indifferently as he held the ball of green flames. This time the two of them really believed him. Old Monster Teng shook his head with a pained expression. He withstood the irresistible heat and knelt down with great difficulty. He kowtowed and said, Mister, this matter was caused by me alone. It has nothing to do with Teng Pa. This lowly demon is willing to die as an apology. I beg Mr. to spare Teng Pa. Old man. Teng Pa looked at Old Monster Teng and cried out in relief. Her man was willing to sacrifice his life to save her at the most critical moment. All of the previous unhappiness instantly disappeared. Old Monster Teng was still kowtowing and begging for mercy. It's too late. Yu Qianzhou lightly spat out these two words. He turned his hand around and clenched his fist. The green flames surged and instantly engulfed the two of them. In that instant, Teng Pa suddenly threw herself onto Old Monster Teng, who was still kowtowing. It was as if she wanted to block the flames for her man. However, all she got in return were two miserable screams. As Yu Qianzhou indifferently sucked the green flames back into his palm, two piles of ashes appeared on the ground. A gust of wind blew them up and they swirled away. Lady Mu and the other two's pupils shrank. They were shocked by the tyrannical power of the green flames. It had actually burned Teng Pa and Old Monster Teng to ashes in an instant. Who said that plants were heartless? Yu Qianzhou stood with his hands behind his back and watched the ashes float away. Then, he swept his gaze over the green vines and coldly snorted. I originally wanted to eradicate the two of you, but seeing that you two were so sentimental before you died. I'll let you two be ignorant plants and let the green vines entangle you until you wither. That's me being merciful. Lady Mu. Yu Qianzhou slowly turned around and said, There's a peach blossom tree demon. Please capture him for me. I want him alive. Chapter 302. It was a large wooden house built against the mountain. It looked like a bandit stronghold and it was very old. In the middle of the house there was a gurgling stream. This is the place where the ruler of this area, the Demon King Lady Mu, lives? Yu Qianzhou couldn't believe it at first. He had never seen the other ghost king of the demon ghost domain, but he had seen Meng Yan's underground palace. That imposing manner was like that of a local tyrant. This demon king is a little too simple. Could it be that he knows that I'm coming to collect protection fees, so he deliberately made it like this? Damn it, I don't even know how to open my mouth. After Lady Mu confirmed it again and again, he reluctantly believed it. After entering the stronghold, magnolia trees could be seen everywhere. Blooming magnolia were dotted among the green leaves, exuding a fragrance. Along the way they didn't see many people and most of them were women. You only have these few subordinates? Yu Qianzhou asked as they walked. Lady Mu, who accompanied him and led the way, replied, Mister, you may not know this, but the spirits of plants are not like the spirits of animals. It's not suitable for them to leave their bodies for a long time. Usually, I only summon them when there's something. I'm being silly. I'll summon them immediately to greet Mister. That's not what I meant. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Yu Qianzhou acted like a leader inspecting his work. He waved his hand, suddenly pulled his collar and sniffed, saying, I was sprayed by the man-eating flowers. Do you have a place to take a bath? Yes. Lady Mu asked, Mister, do you want to use a clear spring or a hot spring? You have a hot spring here? Haha, then let's use a hot spring. As soon as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, Lady Mu immediately whispered to him, probably arranging for someone to prepare it. After a while, the two came to the largest main hall in the stronghold. It was probably the place where Lady Mu was in charge. The simple and exquisite decoration and the thick pink velvet carpet all reflected a woman's taste. Madame Mu stretched out her hand to lead the way. Mister, please follow me. Yu Qianqiu nodded his head and followed her out of the back hall. The scene in front of him suddenly became a little more elegant. There was a meandering stream and a few small wooden bridges across it. It gave off the feeling of a small bridge, flowing water and people's houses. Magnolia trees were scattered among them. It was impossible to tell that this was the residence of a demon king. The two of them walked to the front of a cave. The arched semi-oval cave entrance was carved with intricate patterns, all of which were magnolia blooming in various postures. Miss Mu pulled up the pink gauze hanging at the entrance of the cave and said, "This is the place for bathing. The conditions are poor, but this is the only place in the entire village that is slightly better. Please don't take offense." Yu Qianqiu looked at the pink gauze she had pulled up and asked with a strange expression, "Is this where you take a bath?" Lady Mu nodded her head calmly. She had no choice. The other places were even more crude and the place she used was the best. Therefore she had no choice but to bring Yu Qianqiu there. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything and walked in. A 3-meter-wide bathing pool was in the middle of the stone room. After 2 water infusion troughs from different directions met, water was poured into the pool with a goo-goo sound. With a little effort, one could tell that one of the troughs was from a hot spring, while the other was from a clear spring. Presumably, the temperature had been adjusted according to the flow of water. The bright green pool water was slightly steaming, which was very tempting. Yu Qianqiu couldn't wait to take off his clothes. Suddenly, he remembered that Miss Mu was still by his side. He turned around and tugged at his clothes, saying with a smile, "Then I won't stand on ceremony." He signaled for Miss Mu to leave. "I'm going to take a bath." Unexpectedly, Miss Mu nodded and said, "I'll help you take a bath." After saying that, she stretched out her hand to help Yu Qianqiu take off his clothes. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He immediately waved his hand and said, "Miss Mu, you've misunderstood me. That's not what I meant. How could I dare to trouble the Demon King to serve me? You should call 2 servants." Although he was embarrassed to take advantage of Miss Mu, he could still get 2 other women to serve him. That was what he meant. "No problem. It's my good fortune to be able to help you take a bath." As Miss Mu spoke, she stretched out her hand again. Yu Qianqiu pretended to decline her offer. Under the circumstances where it was difficult to refuse, he was stripped naked and went into the water naked. The water temperature was just right. Yu Qianqiu lay comfortably in the pool and let out a moan. He rested his head on his pillow and closed his eyes to enjoy the feeling. Suddenly he heard the sound of water splashing. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Miss Mu had also stripped herself naked. Her naked body was exposed. 3 words immediately appeared in Yu Qianqiu's mind: lover's bath. She wants to seduce me. This was his next thought. However, when he looked at the expression on Miss Mu's face, he found that she was calm and her eyes were calm. After she leaned over, she did not make any other pretentious movements. Her slender fingers lifted his feet and began to massage his feet. Moreover, her technique was very professional. It seemed that she often did this kind of thing. Yu Qianqiu found it strange. How could a dignified demon king do this often? He couldn't help but ask, "Miss Mu, how did you become so skilled?" Miss Mu smiled and said, "You may not know this, but I served the previous demon king for more than 300 years. Of course I'm skilled." "Oh," Yu Qianqiu said, then closed his eyes to enjoy it again. Since Miss Mu herself did not care, he did not care either. At first, he still had some perverted thoughts, but they were replaced by the comfortable kneading and moving fingertips. Speaking of which, he still had a certain immunity to beautiful women. The key was that the women he had were all top-notch goods. They had good figures and looks. With Miss Mu's physical condition, she really did not have much attraction for him. The strength of her fingertips was just right. They wandered around every part of his body. After a while, Yu Qianqiu actually fell asleep comfortably. He did not know how long he had slept, but suddenly he was gently woken up. Miss Mu said softly, "Sir, the peach blossom demon has been caught, and the ghost king Yin, who is in charge of the local area, is also waiting to see you in the main hall." Yu Qianzhou's sleepy eyes immediately became clear. He climbed out of the water without hesitation and said, "Let's go and see." Miss Mu followed him out of the water. She took a cotton towel from somewhere and helped him wipe his body. The former enjoyed it calmly. His thinking was very simple. Since it was already like this, there was no need to worry about the two of them being willing. Yu Qianzhou summoned a new set of clothes out of thin air. Miss Mu was slightly stunned when she saw it, but immediately helped him put it on. She also quickly put on her clothes. "Your technique is very good, the massage is very comfortable." On the way to the main hall, Yu Qianzhou suddenly said with a smile, "How many people could enjoy having a bath with a demon king at the end of the crossing calamity stage and having him give him a massage? Just thinking about it made him feel good. It is my blessing to be able to serve Sir. Sir likes it, you can come often. I can't ask for more." Miss Mu also smiled. If she could have a good relationship with Bai Changchun's disciple, there was naturally no need to mention the benefits in the future. "Haha, I'm really afraid that I can't help but come often. I can't ask for more." The two of them went to the main hall with smiles on their faces. As soon as they came in, Yu Qianzhou's face darkened. He saw the peach blossom demon kneeling there. A beautiful woman wrapped in green muslin in the hall saw that Yu Qianzhou's expression was not good. She stole a glance at Miss Mu, who smiled slightly. She immediately knelt down and said, "Yin pays respect to Sir." Yu Qianzhou glanced at her coldly and raised his hand to signal her to get up. He walked straight to Peach Blossom and sneered, "Peach Blossom, do you still recognize me?" How could Peach Blossom not recognize him? She did not know why she was caught and brought here. She was in a panic. Now that she saw him walking out with the Demon King and the Ghost King kneeling down to greet him, she immediately realized that she had made a big mistake. She knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly, "I know I was wrong, I know I was wrong. I saved you but you left me and ran away secretly. Hey, I hate ungrateful people the most in my life. Get up. It's useless to bow again." Yu Qianzhou stared at her and said. Peach Blossom hugged his leg and begged bitterly, "Sir, forgive me this time. I won't dare to do it again. I asked you to get up, didn't you hear me?" Yu Qianzhou's voice was very cold. Peach Blossom stood up shakily. Tears were already flowing down her face. She shook her head and cried, "I've been cultivating for thousands of years. I transformed into a human form and was alone. I didn't know Sir's ability at that time. When I saw Tingpa, I was really scared." Her voice stopped abruptly. Yu Qianzhou suddenly poked her chest with both hands. Peach Blossom opened her mouth wide and her eyes bulged. Soon, her eyes shrunk deeply, and smoke began to come out of her 7 orifices. Then the skin all over her body rapidly shrank. Suddenly, a blue flame emerged from her body, and she disappeared without a trace in an instant. "You have eyes but fail to see the situation clearly. Since you can't see the situation clearly, why do you still transform into a human form and continue to be a 1,000-year-old peach tree?" Yu Qianzhou opened his 5 fingers indifferently and sucked the blue flame back into his palm. Chapter 303. The thick pink carpet was not damaged at all, but there was a pile of ashes. It was hard to believe that such a powerful flame could burn on the carpet without burning it. It could be seen that Yu Qianzhou's ability to control flames had reached an exquisite level. Only Yu Qianzhou himself knew the secret. It was said that playing with fire would cause one to be burned, but he was able to control it freely. The Demon King Miss Mu was a little better. She had already seen the fate of Tengpe and her husband. But the Ghost King Yu Yan was a little creeped out. Yu Qianzhou had turned the demoness into ashes with a gentle point of his finger. She thought that she could easily kill the demoness, but it was absolutely impossible for her to turn a person's bones into ashes with a flick of her finger. In particular, the aura emitted by the blue flame was extremely young. Without even trying, she already knew that it could restrain her. The disciple of the torturer was indeed extraordinary. The way he killed without batting an eye was very similar to the style of a torturer. Yu Yan looked at Yu Qianzhou with more and more respect. Yu Qianzhou glanced at Yu Yan, who was standing with her hands behind her back. Although he hated ungrateful people, but to kill a peach blossom here was more or less like killing the chicken to warn the monkey. He wanted to show the female Ghost King that he, the disciple of the torture envoy, was not someone to be trifled with. He walked unceremoniously to the chair in the middle of the main hall and sat down. Looking at the 2 people standing below, he said, "Since the Demon King and the Ghost King are both here, I will say what I want to say. I have something to ask of you this time. I need a batch of spirit stones. I don't know how many you can give me." Miss Mu smiled and said, The spirit stones have been prepared. Why did Mr. come here in person? Yu Qianshou was startled and said, "What? Did you know I was coming to collect spirit stones?" Miss Mu and Yu Yan looked at each other. The former asked doubtfully, when Heli was still here, he had set a rule. Did Mr. not know? I don't know what rule. Lady Mu explained, the demon realm is divided into 300 territories, and each territory is controlled by a demon and a ghost. Therefore, Healy made a rule that each territory needs to pay 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month. At the beginning of every month, the rulers of the 300 territories will send people to deliver the spirit stones to the 1,000 Miles Lake, and Healy will take them all. There is no need for you to go door to door and collect them. What? Yu Qianshou exclaimed. Each territory only needs to pay 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month? He still had some words in his heart. Of Mr. Are you trying to fool me? Just a single piece of land is already frighteningly large. Only you guys can afford to fork out 10,000 a month. Of the territory of the demon realm was already, but it was 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones every month. It's not inappropriate, it's just that. Yu Qianshou rubbed his chin and hesitated for a moment before saying, isn't it a little too little to pay 10,000 high-grade spirit stones per month for each territory? Mr. Tuov of the rule? In that case, how much do you think is appropriate? Well, Yu Qianshou thought to himself. With 300 territories, 10,000 yuan per month was indeed too little. In a year, it would only be a total of 30 million yuan. It was not even as good as the 2 7-star blood orchids that he sold. If it was increased by 100 times, it would be more than 3 billion yuan in a year. That would be a great profit. After thinking for a while, he said, what do you think? How about 1 million per month from each territory? What, 1 million? Miss Mu and Yu Yan exclaimed in unison, their faces full of disbelief. Yu Qianshou's face darkened as he snorted coldly, what? Is 1 million a lot? There are indeed too many. I reckon that most of the territories won't be able to be handed over. Lady Mu shook her head and said with a wry smile, Sir, you may not know this, but spirit stones are the rarest thing in the demon ghost territory. Just like our territory, it's difficult to gather 1 million upper-grade spirit stones in a year. Sir, you want us to hand over 1 million upper-grade spirit stones every month. It's not that we don't want to, but we can't. Yu Qianshou was stunned and asked suspiciously, is the demon ghost territory so poor? In his impression, the demon ghost territory was not only rich in all kinds of rare spirit grasses, but there should also be a lot of spirit stones. In the past, he not only got a lot of top-grade spirit stones in the demon ghost territory, but he even got some divine-grade spirit stones. He was too lazy to dig up those upper-grade spirit stones. How could a demon king not even have 1 million upper-grade spirit stones every month? Lady Mu smiled bitterly and said, compared to the human world, the demon ghost territory is indeed very poor. The same demon cultivators on the same cultivation level spend more time in the demon ghost territory than in the human world, and even spend several times more time. Fortunately, the spiritual qi in the demon ghost territory is far more abundant than in the human world. This time Yu Qianshou was a little depressed. He believed that the two women did not have the courage to lie to him. It seemed that his plan to get rich was ruined. He asked with a little unwillingness, could every territory be so poor? Aren't there any rich ones? That might not be the case. Territories with good luck might discover new mines that have yet to be excavated, but the chances are very small. After all, the demon ghost territory has existed for so many years. Furthermore, the ratio of cultivation is far greater than in the human world. Even if a new mine is excavated, the share is also very large. Therefore, there are very few undiscovered spirit stone mines. Most of the territories are searching for missing spirit stones in some old mines. Lady Mu explained. It seemed like it was purely a coincidence that they found the spirit stone mine back then. Yu Qianshou sat there in silence. Right now, he was very concerned about the tens of millions of upper-grade spirit stones that were swallowed by the Wu clan. After a long time, he said helplessly, since that is the case, let's follow the old rules. Looking at the sky outside, it was already slightly bright. He reckoned that another day had passed, and he still had to rush back to farm. There were still a few days before the start of the month, and the spirit stones for the deficient flame mystic fruit couldn't be cut off. It seemed like he had to use his capital to pay for a few more days. Forget it. Even if it was less, there would still be 36 million spirit stones in a year. After deducting the amount that was used up, he could still earn around 30 million spirit stones. He could only comfort himself like this. He stood up listlessly and waved his hand. That will be all. I still have something to do and have to rush back. He was in a low mood, but he didn't think about it. How many sects could earn 30 million spirit stones in a year even in the human world? He should be content with what he had. However, he was used to seeing a lot of money, and he couldn't lift his spirits with less money. Mr. Lady Mu walked over and bowed. I just received a message. A few demon kings and ghost king in the nearby territories heard that Mr. is here and are rushing over at top speed. They wish to pay their respects to Mr. Some of the territories even prepared a greeting gift for Mr. Would Mr. like to wait a little longer? Yu Qianqiu took a glance at her and thought, damn it. She was so poor that she couldn't even afford spirit stones. How could she possibly have a greeting gift? What else could the demon domain have besides spirit herbs? When he thought of spirit herbs, he was slightly taken aback. He reached for the Pill Grandmaster's Pill Recipe Jade Archive and took out a blank Jade Archive. He spent some time copying the spirit herbs that he didn't have on the Jade Archive and handed it to Lady Mu. There are some drawings of spirit herbs in here. You can make a few copies and pass them to the other demon kings and ghost king. Tell them to help me collect some when they have time. As for the greeting gifts, keep them for me. Give them to me when the opportunity arises. Lady Mu took the Jade Archive and asked in surprise, Mister, do you know alchemy? What's so strange about that? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand weakly. I'll take my leave first. He didn't know that almost no one in the demon domain knew alchemy. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many rare spirit herbs left uncollected in the demon domain. Lady Mu glanced at Yu Yan and bowed. I'm afraid you might run into someone as blind as old Monster Teng. We'll see you off, mister. There's no need. Yu Qianqiu walked out of the hall alone. With his back facing the two women, he waved his hand and said, I'm not in a good mood. If there are any more blind fools, I won't waste my breath on them. I'll kill every one of them I see. Then he unsheathed his long sword and carried him away into the sky. Chapter 304. After returning to Shuntian Island, Yu Qianqiu remembered that he had forgotten to ask where the spirit stones could be obtained at the 1,000-mile lake. There was no need to go back and ask. Although a small silver ball had been secretly placed in Miss Mu's village, with Bai Changchun around, he did not dare to play the trick of suddenly disappearing and reappearing, so he could only wait until that day. In the following days, in addition to taking care of the deficient flame profound fruit, Yu Qianqiu also paid his respects to Bai Changchun every morning and evening. The old man sat there cross-legged without even opening his eyes. He only let out a soft indicating that he understood. In fact, Bai Changchun did not restrict his freedom at all. As long as he served the deficient flame profound fruit well, he could play however he wanted and go wherever he wanted. However, he still did not dare to leave the demon domain. After all, he had not agreed to leave the demon domain. The surrounding houses where Healy used to live now belonged to him, so he often wandered by Changchun's door, looking for an opportunity to strike up a conversation. However, Bai Changchun was like an old monk in meditation, sitting there without moving. Yu Qianqiu was anxious. Since he had already taken him as his master, he had to get some real things out of the old man's mouth. For example, the old man's cultivation method was what he coveted the most. Just think, more than 2,000 years ago, when the old man had not yet reached the soul formation stage, none of the top masters in the cultivation world could exchange more than 3 moves with him. Furthermore, he had the ability to split a mountain with his sword. Any one of them would be enough for him to show off. Taking a step back, he could also give one of the spiritual treasures of the 4 families that he had seen last time. However, Bai Changchun had been sitting there, and he did not dare to disturb him except for the excuse of paying his respects. At the beginning of the month, he once again went to Lady Mu's mountain stronghold with his sword. When she found out that he came because he didn't know the location of the spirit stones collection, Lady Mu told him the location with a strange expression on her face. Then she helped him bathe together. He lay in the bath and made a decision. He asked Lady Mu to pass on the message that the place to collect spirit stones would be changed to this mountain stronghold. Miss Mu was naturally happy about this. It was definitely a good thing to be in contact with the disciples of the punishment enforcer. While putting on his clothes, Yu Qianqiu asked, "Didn't you say last time that someone was going to give me a gift? Have you delivered it yet?" Miss Mu, who was naked but was helping him put on his clothes, smiled and said, "They said there's no need to trouble me. When I see you, I'll give it to you personally." "Are they afraid that you'll keep their things?" Yu Qianqiu asked. "That's not it. Even if they wanted me to stop them, they would know that I wouldn't dare to do so. He probably wants to meet you and express his sincerity, Lady Mu said with a smile. Problem. Yu Qianqiu snorted. He could guess what those demons and ghosts were thinking. They just wanted to get acquainted with the disciplinary envoy's disciple. After thinking about it, he decided to satisfy them, so he said, Miss Mu, send a message to those who want to see me. Tell them to wait for me here at the beginning of next month. Lady Mu, who was dressing herself, smiled and said, With your words, my place will be lively. I reckon that the 300 demon kings and the 300 ghost king will all rush here. As he spoke, he suddenly frowned and said, Mister, won't this cause too much of a commotion? What if the torture enforcer is unhappy? Damn it. It's better if he's unhappy. I can't even find a chance to talk to him. It's best if he can find me. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered and he waved his hand and said, It's fine. If there's anything, just push it to me. Just say that I was the one who called for them. Speaking of all the demon kings and ghost king coming here, Yu Qianqiu thought of Yu Ji, who was good at playing tricks. He didn't know if she would still come after her husband died. She probably would. Understood. Lady Mu looked at him meaningfully. If it was the Li He of the past, he would definitely be very careful and would never dare to say something like this. Lady Mu had already sent someone to fetch the spirit stones that Yu Qianqiu wanted from the 1,000 Miles Lake. Yu Qianqiu tossed the spirit stones into his storage pouch and rushed back to Obedient Island. He found that Bai Changchun was still sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, meditating. He didn't know how long Bai Changchun was going to sit there. After wandering around for a few days, Miao Yi grew impatient, so he gave up on the idea of wandering around Miao Yi's doorstep. He took out a jade archive and ran to the edge of the island to study it. Recorded on it were the orbits of the star atlas of the 4 directions. Since he had nothing better to do and it wasn't like he could steal it, he might as well see if he could come up with something similar to the star flame fire technique. In the past, he had guessed that the star atlas contained 5 types of elemental magic arts, but he was still groping for the right direction, so he didn't know if it was possible. Bai Changchun didn't even need to open his eyes to know that Yu Qianqiu had been wandering around during this period of time. With his level of cultivation, not even an ant crawling on the island could hide from him. Miao Yi was also curious about Yu Qianqiu's actions. During the day, this kid would wander around blindly after finishing his work. When he had nothing to do, he would catch a few fish and roast them. Occasionally he would catch some birds and beasts to roast, and would even ask if Miao Yi wanted to eat them. Miao Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so Miao Yi decided to ignore him. Furthermore, the wine in his storage pouch seemed to be inexhaustible, and he used it as water to quench his thirst. At night, as soon as the sky turned dark, Miao Yi would cover his head and sleep soundly, snoring loudly until dawn. Once he got up, he would run to the edge of the lake and make some strange movements with his buttocks in the air. Then he would strip naked and dive into the water to swim. He would catch a fish for breakfast, and when he was full, he would go to work in the garden of the deficient flame profound fruit. Just like this, Miao Yi had never seen him cultivate. If everyone was like him, then there would be no need for him to cultivate. Miao Yi really didn't know how he was able to reach the late core formation stage at such a young age. Actually, Bai Changchun didn't know that Yu Qianqiu himself didn't want to be idle like this. The key was that ever since he absorbed the azure fire, the core in his dantian seemed to have a spiritual nature, and could refine spiritual qi to cultivate. If he were to sit down and painstakingly cultivate, it would be faster to let nature take its course. In fact, he only needed to take out a spirit stone from time to time and absorb spiritual qi. Since it was already like this, was there still a need for him to sit there and cultivate? In addition, he didn't dare to steal it, so he naturally had nothing better to do. Therefore, in the morning he would do calisthenics, swim and make some snacks. Otherwise, Big Brother would be lonely. Which star chart of the 4 directions should he study first? Yu Qianqiu sat by the lake, shaking his head as he pondered. His gaze fell upon the surface of the lake and he paused for a moment. In his previous life, the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were located in the north. If his guess was correct, the northern star chart should be related to water. With such a large lake here, it was just the right time to verify his conjecture. Out of boredom, he immediately found a way to pass the time. He immersed his divine sense into the northern star chart recorded in the Jade Archive, and calmed his body and mind as he studied the changing trajectories of the star chart. As he sat there, he lost track of time. The moon rose, the moon set, and the stars sank. In the blink of an eye, it was dawn of the next day, yet he was still sitting there in the same position. Usually he would work in the morning, but even when the sun was high in the sky, he was still sitting there with his eyes closed, deep in thought. He had already entered a certain state. This strange phenomenon immediately attracted Bai Changchun's attention. Sitting cross-legged in the room, Bai Changchun finally opened his eyes, revealing an expression of disbelief. He abruptly disappeared from where he was, and soundlessly reappeared in front of Yu Qianqiu. His eyes shone brightly as he sized him up. With his eyes closed, Yu Qianqiu's expression kept changing. Sometimes he would smile foolishly like a child, sometimes he would furrow his brows in deep thought, and sometimes his brows would relax and he would nod slightly, as if he had understood something. Bai Changchun's expression was extremely shocked. He had cultivated for more than 2,000 years, and his knowledge was vast. The Yu Qianqiu in front of him had obviously comprehended something and entered a state of enlightenment. For cultivators, this was definitely something that could only be encountered by chance. Once they comprehended it, they would benefit for the rest of their lives. Normally, cultivators with low comprehension would find it very difficult to enter this state. Usually, only cultivators with extremely high talent would be able to enter this state. For example, he himself was considered one of the most talented cultivators in the same generation. When he broke through to the soul formation stage at the age of 300, he entered a state of enlightenment. After another 300 years, he broke through to the middle stage from the early stage of soul formation, and after another 500 years, this state of enlightenment appeared again, helping him break through to the late stage of soul formation. However, after reaching the late stage of soul formation, after more than 1,000 years, this state of enlightenment that he yearned for never appeared again. As his lifespan was nearing its end, he had no choice but to search for external methods. He wanted to take the risk of entering the Eastern Holy Land to find a method to break through and ascend. He broke through to the soul formation stage at the age of 300, and reached the middle stage at the age of 600. In total, it took him 1,100 years to reach the late stage of soul formation. Among his peers, his talent was definitely at the top of the best. At the same time, he understood that this was inseparable from his bitter cultivation. However, this young man in front of him, who was always fooling around and idling around, had actually entered a state of enlightenment. His talent was already considered high, but he only had this opportunity when he was 300 years old. But how old was this kid? Was it talent or the will of the heavens? How was this possible? He had never heard of it before. Bai Changchun shook his head and smiled bitterly. His gaze fell on the jade archive in Yu Qianqiu's hand. He thought to himself, could it be that there's something strange about this jade archive? He raised his hand, wanting to take it for a closer look. However, just as he raised his hand, he put it down again and shook his head slightly. If it had nothing to do with this jade archive, he would definitely wake Yu Qianqiu up from this state of enlightenment if he took the jade archive. He might even ruin the one and only opportunity in his life. It was difficult to seek for oneself, but it was also impossible to destroy others. This was the will of the heavens. This was the will of the heavens. He could not go against the will of the heavens. Bai Changchun raised his head to look at the horizon and sighed softly. He thought of the phrase he often said, if the heavens have feelings. However, it had been a long time since the heavens' favor had descended upon him. Now it had descended upon the disciple he had accepted. Fate, was this the will of the heavens? Chapter 305. Bai Changchun's gaze paused on the blazing sun. Only then did he remember that this kid was in a meditative state and he didn't know when he would wake up. He probably wouldn't think of the deficient flame profound fruit for a while. It seemed like he could only do it for him. After idling around for so long, it was rare for him to have this kind of luck after calming down. Bai Changchun glanced at Yu Qianqiu and shook his head with a wry smile. His figure flashed and appeared in the garden where the deficient flame profound fruit was planted. He took out some spirit stones from his storage bag. Yu Qianqiu didn't know that his current state was something that could only be found by chance. Even Bai Changchun was envious of this state. For him, as long as he was willing to calm down, this state should appear at any time. It was the same when he comprehended the star flame fire technique last time. In fact, as Bai Changchun thought, there might be some heavens will involved or it could be luck. Bai Sujin and Yu Qianqiu didn't know the name of the golden bead. If Bai Changchun knew about its mysterious effects, he would be able to tell its origin. This thing was the star bead that caused the ancient cultivation world war. In fact, it wasn't just the cultivation world. As the punishment envoy of the demon ghost domain, Bai Changchun also knew other unknown secrets. In the ancient cultivation world war, even many experts from the immortal world risked being punished by the immortals. They braved the danger of never being reincarnated and never being reincarnated to come to the human world to fight over this star bead. At that time, this world was a world where humans, demons, and ghosts coexisted. The three creatures abided by their rules and generally wouldn't openly offend each other. They each cultivated their own way. When the time came, you became your immortal and I became my immortal. In the end, a group of strong people turned the world upside down for this bead. The rules that humans, demons, and ghosts abided by became **T. In short, the duel between the higher-ups implicated the lower-ups. The lower-ups didn't know what the higher-ups were doing, but they also followed and caused chaos in the world. Demons and ghosts ran amok everywhere, and the human bodies that didn't cultivate suffered. It was at this time that an amazing person appeared and tricked a group of people who liked to fight to a desolate continent in the east. He set up some heaven and earth great array, and trapped the group of troublemaking hooligans. That place was now the **T Eastern Holy Land. However, because of this, the powerful man was severely injured by a group of hooligans. Before he died, the powerful man once again showed his power and forced most of the demons and ghosts to another barren land. Because he was about to die, he did not have the ability to cast a formation again, so he used his spiritual treasure to casually play around. When there was no tiger in the mountain, the monkey would act as the king. The awesome man chose the remaining expert who was about the same level as him to be the torturer, meaning that if there was a ghost or a demon that was disobedient, he would punish him. This was the origin of the domain of demons and ghosts, so Bai Changchun as a torture envoy, knew that the golden pearl was called the star pearl. The misty universe existed eternally. The primordial bead was bestowed by the primordial chaos. There was a legend passed down from generation to generation among the torturers of the domain of demons and ghosts. It was said that those who could obtain and control the star pearl could become a god who dominated a region. In other words, it was an existence that was more advanced than immortals. It was the kind of existence that no one could restrain except for the primordial chaos. Therefore, such an awesome thing naturally made the experts in the immortal world unable to restrain themselves. So, they ran to the human world to play hooligans. Unfortunately, a large group of people was defeated by an awesome person. If Yu Qianqiu knew that he had such a thing in his hands, he would definitely go crazy with joy. Fortunately, he did not know. However, he was not a fool. Even if he did not know, he would have regarded the golden pearl as his family treasure. Except for Bai Sujin who already knew, it would be difficult for others to ask him even if they beat him to death. He could feel the benefits of the golden pearl more and more, so he decided to keep it to himself until he was old. In this way, it also explained why Yu Qianqiu could enter the state that even Bai Changchun envied so easily. Originally, with the star pearl in his body, comprehending the orbit of the stars, compared to others, was like looking for something in his own home. It was much easier than others. Yu Qianqiu, whose consciousness was immersed in the Jade Archive, didn't know how much time had passed. His mind was filled with the changing orbit of the stars. In order to transform it into a cultivation technique, he racked his brains. Because he had the experience of comprehending the star flame fire technique by chance, the orbit of the countless stars in the constellation diagram was slowly merging and straightening out. Bai Changchun had just finished replenishing the spirit stones for the star flame profound fruit. His eyes suddenly flashed and he teleported to Yu Qianqiu's side. He saw that Yu Qianqiu, who was originally sitting casually, had already sat cross-legged in a well-behaved manner. His face had a gratified smile and an expression of understanding. He had comprehended it. It had only been a little more than a day. Bai Changchun was an experienced person. He could tell at a glance. His expression twitched a little, and at the same time, he could tell that Yu Qianqiu was still in a state that had yet to awaken. Everything he was doing now was like a dream. Bai Changchun's gaze fell on the jade archive that had fallen to the ground. He raised his hand and sucked it into his palm. He imbued his consciousness to examine it, and found that it was filled with a mess of densely packed dots of light. Who knew what they were? However, Bai Changchun's intuition told him that Yu Qianqiu's entry into the realm might have something to do with this item. Thus, he patiently examined it, hoping to discover something. One was sitting, the other was standing. Unknowingly, another day had passed like this. The sky brightened once again. Bai Changchun slowly opened his eyes and shook his head with a bitter smile. He had pried into someone else's privacy without their permission. Based on his own status, he shouldn't have done so, even though this person was his disciple. Unfortunately, even though he was thick-skinned enough to do so, he still couldn't see through it. There were countless dots of light inside and he really couldn't figure out what they were. Actually, it wasn't just him. Even if the gods were here, they wouldn't be able to understand what they were. These were the markings of the stars that Yu Qianqiu had memorized in a hurry. To be more precise, it should be the markings of the 5 directions constellations, with the southern one missing. It was an incomplete item to begin with, and Yu Qianqiu had made it for Bai Changchun to see. It was like a person's handwriting. If the handwriting was too sloppy, it would be difficult for others to understand it. Only the person who wrote it would be able to understand it. Even the gods wouldn't be able to understand such an unfathomable thing recorded in the Jade Archive, let alone Bai Changchun, even though he had a profound cultivation base. Regretfully, Bai Changchun quietly placed the Jade Archive back in its original spot. He had done something shameful and thought to himself, "I'll make it up to you in the future." Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly sensed something amiss with his spiritual sense. He looked around but couldn't find anything. He immediately released his divine sense to investigate. He saw that the surface of the lake that Yu Qianqiu was facing was densely packed with tiny crystalline dots that were hard to see with the naked eye. Those dots of light were like happy little fairies, circling around Yu Qianqiu's body and jumping around cheerfully. Finally, they burrowed into Yu Qianqiu's pores. What are these things? Could it be that an external evil has invaded his body? Bai Changchun was shocked. He still had many questions for this disciple of his, and he couldn't afford for anything to happen to him at this moment. He immediately raised his hand with a solemn expression, intending to use his profound cultivation base to chase these tiny, unknown things away. However, in the end he didn't make a move. He was stopped by the comfortable expression on Yu Qianqiu's face. An external evil invading one's body should be painful, not comfortable. With his rich experience, Bai Changchun didn't make a rash decision. Instead, he carefully stood guard for Yu Qianqiu. If he found anything amiss, he would immediately lend a helping hand. Standing next to Yu Qianqiu, he could feel the air getting more and more humid. It was so humid that he could squeeze water out of it. A faintly discernible, illusory and transparent substance began to wrap around Yu Qianqiu, until it turned into a watery liquid, clear and transparent. Bai Changchun heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that he had been overthinking things. This kid seemed to have cultivated some kind of mysterious technique. Looking at the blazing sun in the sky, Bai Changchun smiled bitterly once more. He teleported to the deficient flame profound fruits garden. Chapter 306. Water Elements. The little elves happily flowed into his meridians. A smile appeared on Yu Qianqiu's face. It seemed like his guess about the 5-direction star map was right. There were indeed 5 elemental spells of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. After mastering the spell, Yu Qianqiu didn't have any misgivings and placed the water elements into the cultivation center, the Dantian. Once the little fellows entered the Dantian, they were immediately attracted to the core formation like the fire elements. They all surged towards the core formation, one after another and for some unknown reason. When the water element no longer entered his Dantian and began to surge toward his limbs and bones, Yu Qianqiu's body trembled. It was as if he was extremely thirsty and suddenly drank cool spring water. He was so comfortable that he let out a moan. Then he quickly began to circulate the water art. Bai Changchun, who was standing not far away, watched the strange scene in front of him. He saw that Yu Qianqiu was surrounded by a huge transparent ball of water. His whole body had left the ground and was floating in the middle of the ball of water. Just when Yu Qianqiu let out a moan, countless tiny shiny objects that were hard to see with the naked eye rose from the 1,000-mile lake and rushed towards him. The ball of water with a diameter of about 2 meters began to expand. When the ball of water expanded to about 10 meters in diameter, it stopped. Bai Changchun's expression was serious. This was already the 10th day since Yu Qianqiu entered the qi refining realm. The longer he stayed in the qi refining realm, the more benefits he would get. Every time he entered the qi refining realm, he would stay in the qi refining realm for 10 days at most. If Yu Qianqiu could stay in the qi refining realm for more than 10 days, then without a doubt, Yu Qianqiu's talent was higher than his. People who had reached his level of cultivation all knew that the length of time one stayed in the qi refining realm was related to the time one stayed in the qi refining realm. Usually, the longer one stayed in the qi refining realm, the longer one stayed in the qi refining realm. Otherwise, the shorter the time one stayed in the qi refining realm. This was talent. When the water element was injected into every cell in his body, Yu Qianqiu was initially worried that water and fire would not be compatible because his body stored the fire element of the green fire. Who knew that once the water element entered his body, the fire element in every cell would start to compress and automatically give up half of the space. Water and fire would coexist in a line and would not interfere with each other. Just as he was about to call it a day, the core in his dantian suddenly began to move. From the initial slow rotation, it gradually turned into a rapid rotation. The true essence in his dantian was crazily absorbed. The true essence in his dantian was sucked dry, and it began to spread to the true essence outside his dantian. His dantian was like a sewer, and all the true essence in his body was sucked in. There was only one reason, and that was to support the absorption of the core. *CKME. How could this be? Yu Qianqiu panicked a little. He had never heard of such a thing. If this continued, he would be sucked dry. He quickly grabbed a handful of spirit stones with both hands and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. Bai Changchun naturally noticed Huang Xiaolong's abnormality. Huang Xiaolong was still in the process of advancing, but he could still take out spirit stones to absorb spiritual energy. Strange. But at this moment, Yu Qianqiu was not feeling strange but afraid. The true essence in his body was almost sucked dry, and the core did not even let go of the spiritual energy in his dantian, crazily rotating and absorbing it. 2 more handfuls of spirit stones, not enough. Then 2 more handfuls, still not enough. Huang Xiaolong grabbed handfuls of spirit stones, crazily absorbing the spiritual energy into his body. Unfortunately, the core was like a bottomless pit, not rejecting anything. Whether it was true essence or spiritual energy, as long as it was to its liking, it would absorb it all. *CK. Yu Qianqiu wished he could take out the black divine grade spirit stone and absorb it, but his mind was still clear. They were still on the obedient island. Who knew what kind of consequences it would bring if he took out such a heaven-defying treasure? Bai Changchun's eyes shone brightly as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. The speed at which he was absorbing spiritual energy was getting faster and faster. In the end, Bai Changchun was able to grab a handful of spirit stones in each hand, like a whale drinking water. 2 handfuls of spirit stones were sucked dry in the blink of an eye, then tossed away. Another 2 handfuls, more and more spirit stones appeared in Bai Changchun's hands, to the point that they were about to fall off. 10,000 high-grade spirit stones, 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, 200,000. Bai Changchun was dumbfounded. How could someone absorb spirit stones at such a crazy speed? Even with his cultivation, he could only absorb 10,000 high-grade spirit stones at a time, then slowly refine them. It was impossible for him to absorb spirit stones endlessly. How could his body store so much spiritual energy without refining it? Not to mention, he no longer needed to absorb spirit stones to increase his cultivation. Crazy. 2 handfuls of over 100 high-grade spirit stones were sucked dry in 2 seconds. In 1 minute, he had absorbed over 3,000 high-grade spirit stones. In 2 hours, that was close to 200,000 high-grade spirit stones. Bai Changchun was so shocked that he nearly forgot to replenish the deficient flame profound fruit. 2 days later, Yu Qianqiu finally stopped, panting heavily. In fact, Bai Changchun was more exhausted than Yu Qianqiu. In 2 days, Bai Changchun estimated that he had absorbed more than 10 million high-grade spirit stones in one go. It was truly shocking and unbelievable. Fortunately, Yu Qianqiu was floating in the air, and below him was the foot of the obedient island that extended all the way to the 1,000 miles lake. Otherwise, he would have been drowned by the spirit stones. Damn it! Finally stopped. What the hell is this? making this daddy so nervous. This daddy almost died of exhaustion. Yu Qianqiu's little heart was thumping wildly. The haunted core in his dantian finally stopped. At this time, the core had already turned golden. From its high-speed rotation, it gradually slowed down until it finally stopped. However, Yu Qianqiu felt as if there was another him inside, ready to break out of the shell. Could it be that he was going to break through to the nascent soul stage? That's not right. How could it be so fast? Also, he had never heard of anyone absorbing so many spirit stones to break through to the nascent soul stage. Yu Qianqiu was a little confused. He did not even calculate how many spirit stones he had absorbed. Suddenly, there was a movement in his dantian, which immediately attracted his attention. A crack slowly appeared on the golden core suspended in his dantian. As time passed, the crack became bigger and bigger. After a long time, the golden core finally cracked open. A few pieces of the golden shell fell off and turned into a golden mist. In an instant, the entire dantian was filled with golden mist. Within the golden mist, a baby with complete facial features and 4 limbs could be faintly seen. As the mist floated, the baby's eyes were tightly closed. He was quietly floating in the dantian with his legs crossed. Suddenly, the baby's delicate nose slightly moved. With a fierce breath, the golden mist that was floating in the surroundings was immediately sucked into the baby's body. He broke through. He really broke through to the nascent soul stage. Damn it. Yu Qianqiu could not say whether he was happy or not. He could only forcefully control his emotions. He carefully looked at the baby. He could clearly see that the baby's facial features were somewhat similar to his own. The baby had small arms and legs and was strong and lovable. Suddenly, the baby sneezed fiercely, and 2 shiny little balls came out of his nostrils. One was red and the other was black. What the hell is this? He had never heard of such a thing when breaking through to the nascent soul stage. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He released his divine sense to touch it. After a little sensing, he immediately understood what was going on. The red one was actually a fire elemental crystal, and the black one was a water elemental crystal. At this moment, the baby who was sitting cross-legged in meditation yawned again. He saw that the spiritual energy in his dantian had been sucked into it. After a long time he breathed out. However, when he breathed out the spiritual energy, it had already turned into a tiny wisp of true essence. Just like that, the little guy began his first breath. The spiritual energy was inhaled, and the true essence was exhaled. And just as he began to breathe, the red fire elemental crystal and the black water elemental crystal, one on the left and one on the right, began to slowly revolve around him. Chapter 307. What's going on? Yu Qianqiu was taken aback once again. He saw the golden bead, which had been circulating freely in his dantian, fly to the top of the nascent soul's head and stop. It only stopped for a moment before the golden bead slowly descended and touched the top of the nascent soul's head. In an instant, the golden bead emitted a brilliant light that illuminated his entire dantian. It pierced Yu Qianqiu's divine sense, causing him to feel a faint pain. He couldn't see anything, so he hurriedly retracted his divine sense and didn't dare to look anymore. It didn't matter if he couldn't see the movements in his dantian, but he felt that he couldn't move at all. It was as if something was slowly entering his brain. He wanted to circulate his energy to resist, but unfortunately his body was stiff. He could only accept the invasion of that thing. After a long while, he felt that the thing had completed its fusion with his brain. Once the fusion was successful, he immediately felt that he could move. He quickly sent his divine sense into his dantian and saw that the golden bead had disappeared. Where did it go? Where did my golden bead go? Yu Qianqiu scanned his body with his divine sense. He was really anxious. Without the golden bead, how was he going to return to Utopia? By Suzhin, his parents, his family, Chu Ping'er, and his army. No matter how his divine sense rumbled in his body, he couldn't find the mysterious golden bead. That's not right. When the golden bead was pressed on the nascent soul's head, he felt that something had fused with his brain. Could it be in the nascent soul's head? He kept thinking about the people in Utopia. The moment his divine sense touched the nascent soul's body, the scene in Utopia immediately appeared in front of him. His divine sense swept across Utopia to investigate. After confirming that he could still communicate with Utopia through the nascent soul, Yu Qianqiu finally heaved a sigh of relief. It didn't matter if the golden bead was around. As long as he could return to Utopia, it was likely that the golden bead had fused with the nascent soul. Everything that happened in his dantian was too incredible. Once he successfully cultivated the water spell, The movement in his dantian was simply earth-shattering. He really couldn't figure it out and couldn't understand it. It involved a rather profound truth of the great Tao. He happened to practice the incantation of water and fire by chance, which implied the number of yin and yang. Together with the mysterious effect of the star bead, it immediately changed the core. It absorbed the spiritual aura crazily to complete its own evolution. As a result, the core took shape in advance, and Yu Qianshou also broke through to the nascent soul stage in advance. What made Yu Qianshou ecstatic was that his nascent soul was actually refining the spiritual qi and transforming it into true essence. Just like before, he didn't need to sit there and cultivate like an idiot. In fact, cultivation was really a boring thing. Once he got rid of the sea of suffering, he could free up time to do other things. The water ball enveloping him slowly retracted into his body, and he also sat on the ground. Yu Qianshou, whose face was filled with joy, finally opened his eyes. He had successfully cultivated the water spell and had broken through to the original infant stage. How could he not be happy? The night sky was bright with stars, and it was an enchanting night. Yu Qianshou gazed at the enchanting starry sky, and the smile on his face gradually stiffened. F***ck. He suddenly let out a strange cry. He really didn't know how long he had been sitting there. What time was it now? And Bai Changchun had given him the task of taking care of the deficient flame profound fruit. He immediately jumped up high and turned around, wanting to run towards the deficient flame profound fruit's garden. However, he saw Bai Changchun standing behind him, looking at him with sparkling eyes. Yu Qianshou came to a sudden stop and awkwardly bowed. Master? You've broken through to the early nascent soul stage? Bai Changchun asked, sizing him up. Yu Qianshou respectfully replied, Yes, master. The jade archive was still on the ground. Bai Changchun raised his hand and took it. Is the incantation you're practicing related to the things inside? Yes, master. Yu Qianshou thought to himself, the things I've figured out are nothing in your eyes, so it doesn't matter if I tell you. What's so profound about this? Why can't even I understand it? Bai Changchun asked. Inside are the coordinates of the stars in the sky. The incantation this disciple created was precisely based on the stars in the sky. Speaking of which, it's also because of Master. Otherwise, this disciple wouldn't have thought of this. You're saying that the incantation you created is related to me? Bai Changchun revealed a doubtful expression. Yu Qianshou smiled sheepishly. Master, you may not know this, but this disciple has a good relationship with the 4 great clans of the cultivation world. Once, at the Wu clan's ancestral hall, I offered incense to Master. They all thought that Master had already passed away. To show my respect, this disciple also offered incense in front of Master's portrait. In the end, I heard the Wu clan talk about Master's past, saying that all of your incantation arts were comprehended from the way of heaven. I saw in the portrait that Master was looking up at the starry sky, so this disciple boldly guessed that the way of heaven that Master comprehended had something to do with the stars in the sky. As a result, this disciple often learned to look up at the stars, and in the end accidentally comprehended some incantation arts and casually used it. Bai Changchun looked at Miao Yi with a rare look of astonishment. Then he sent his divine sense into the jade archive to examine it, then looked at the starry sky. Indeed, he found some similarities. He thought to himself, I haven't even taken him as my disciple, but because of one of my portraits, we're already destined to be master and disciple. It seems that taking him as my disciple is indeed the will of the heavens. He was worried that after he left, the demon domain would wreak havoc in the mortal realm. Who would have thought that the heavens would have their own plans? Bai Changchun was overwhelmed with emotions. He took a few light steps forward and stood by the lake. He placed the hand holding the jade archive behind his back and gazed at the starry sky, remaining silent for a long time. Yu Qianshou saw that Miao Yi seemed to be deep in thought, so he didn't dare to disturb him. Thus, he obediently stood behind Miao Yi and accompanied him. In the end, Miao Yi stood there until dawn. It was only when the sky was enveloped by the morning glow that Bai Changchun turned around and handed the jade archive back to Yu Qianshou. He said, This is your destiny. Even I can't pry into it. You must cultivate well and be kind to your destiny. After saying this, he slowly walked away by himself. Holding the jade archive in his hands, Yu Qianshou was stunned. I've waited so long to talk to you. How can I let you off so easily? He couldn't help but call out, Master? Hearing this, Bai Changchun turned around and asked, Is something the matter? Yu Qianshou ran over eagerly. After dawdling for a while, he was a little embarrassed to speak. If you have something to say, say it, Bai Changchun said. That. Yu Qianzhou gritted his teeth and said, this disciple's cultivation is still shallow. Can Master teach me a few powerful techniques so that I can protect myself? He was filled with admiration for Bai Changchun's amazing feats. It would be wonderful if he could learn a few powerful techniques. When the time came, he could defeat all the experts from the various sects in the cultivation world within 3 moves. Moreover, he had to do it openly. Then, his name would definitely shake the world and he would become the strongest leader in the cultivation world. Haven't you already figured out a suitable technique for yourself? Why do you still want to learn from me? Bai Changchun asked. Damn it. If I don't want to learn from you, why did you take me in as your disciple? Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, this little trick of mine is nothing in front of Master. How can it compare to Master's profound techniques? This disciple truly wishes to learn them. Little trick? Is this supreme and holy technique that can borrow the power of the origin of heaven and earth a little trick? Bai Changchun retorted. He looked at him seriously and said, Yu Qian, listen carefully. From what I can see, the technique you've figured out is the true holy technique of the Great Path. It's much stronger than what I've figured out. I can't wait to be envious. Why do you want to neglect the essentials? Chapter 308. Origin of Heaven and Earth? Holy and Supreme? Is it that powerful? Yu Qianzhou's tone was a little doubtful. Bai Changchun nodded. You don't have to doubt this. I can tell from your ability to control fire and water that it's not because your cultivation level is high enough to control them, but because the technique you practice allows you to easily use the origin of fire and water. The fire and water are you, and you are the fire and water. The origin of fire and water have already become one with you, and you can summon them at will. It's so mysterious that it allows you to use it as you please. How can it not be powerful? Although what he said was reasonable, Yu Qianzhou's level was still too far away from what he knew. He didn't care whether it was one or not, or whether it was mysterious or not. To put it bluntly, he still didn't understand how powerful it was. Yu Qianzhou frowned, his face full of confusion. You still don't understand? Bai Changchun saw it too. Yu Qianzhou shook his head and answered honestly, I am ignorant, I don't understand. Bai Changchun paused and asked, how is Heli's cultivation compared to yours? Not as good as Heli. When I fought him before, he was already in the middle stage of the passing calamity stage. I was only in the late stage of the core formation stage. I was 5 stages lower than him. You were able to kill someone in the middle stage of the passing calamity stage when you were in the late stage of the core formation stage. Can't you see how powerful your technique is? At the very least, when I was in the late stage of the core formation stage, I couldn't kill someone in the late stage of the passing calamity stage. Master, this is different. Healy didn't die to my technique, but to Qinghua's tyranny. If it wasn't for this disciple's plan, no matter how powerful Qinghua was, he wouldn't have been able to touch him, let alone kill him. Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly. He was aware of his own limitations. What's the difference? In the end, Heli still lost to your fire technique. It really is different. Master, Heli didn't react in time. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. If Healy's cultivation had already reached the final stage of crossing tribulation, he would have been able to use teleportation to escape once he realized that something was amiss. I wouldn't have been able to hurt him, let alone kill him. At that time I would have been killed. Truly a piece of rotten wood guarding a treasure mountain without knowing how to use it. Bai Changchun sighed and said, in this world, no matter how powerful the incantation is, no matter who has it, the one who can use it well will be invincible. If one can't use it well, no matter how powerful the incantation is, it's useless. Yu Qianzhou, since you know that it was your own scheme and Qinghua's tyranny that killed Healy, you should understand that the most powerful magic art is to use it well, not the magic art itself. Damn it. Who didn't know how to talk about principles? No matter how good Laozi was, it was impossible for him to split a mountain in half with one sword strike. Yu Qianzhou thought for a while and said, Disciple has 2 questions that I would like Master to clear up. Speak. Bai Changchun looked at him with deep meaning in his eyes. He understood that if he didn't explain things clearly today, even if Yu Qianzhou accepted it verbally, he wouldn't be convinced in his heart. Yu Qianzhou bowed and said, First question, if Disciple didn't practice the fire incantation that day when I fought with Healy, but used the water incantation that I had just mastered, how could Disciple defeat him? Second question, Disciple recently saw a stone mountain that had been split in half by someone. I heard that it was split by Master's sword strike. Disciple knows that even if I was good at using it, I wouldn't be able to split such a large stone mountain with one sword strike. To be able to use such a tyrannical sword strike, I'm afraid that Master's cultivation base and the incantation that you practice must have something to do with it. Do you know about Master's cultivation experience? Master might as well tell you about it. A faint smile appeared on Bai Changchun's face as he stood by the lake with his hands behind his back. He looked at the distant horizon and said in an aged voice, "More than 2,000 years ago, I was a young scholar who came to the capital to take the imperial examination. At that time, my greatest desire was to be nominated for the imperial examination and bring honor to my ancestors. However, the affairs of the world are unpredictable. Because I was drenched in the rain before the examination, I fell seriously ill and entered the examination hall with a serious illness. Naturally, I didn't make it to the imperial examination hall. Feeling ashamed, I felt that I couldn't face my hometown elders again, so I had the idea of committing suicide. I stumbled and found a cliff and jumped down." Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded when he heard this. This torturer, who was famous in the demon ghost region, had committed suicide by jumping off a cliff when he was young? But what did he mean by telling me this? Could it be that he had picked up some secret manual at the foot of the mountain, or met some otherworldly expert or something? As you can see, I'm naturally not dead since I'm standing here. After jumping off the cliff, I was lucky enough to fall into a deep pool. After experiencing life to death and then back to life again, I no longer had the thought of seeking death. However, I was trapped in the cliff and couldn't get out. There was a dead body at the foot of the cliff. I picked up a book beside him and opened it. It was about the method of cultivation. Here it comes, here it comes. I really picked up a secret manual. I'm going to find a few cliffs to jump off one day. Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly lit up. At that time, I knew nothing about the cultivation world. After reading the contents of the book, I thought it was a wonderful method of immortals and was extremely happy. Later, I learned that it was just a manual for beginners in cultivation. At the time, I cultivated under the cliff and stayed there for more than 10 years. When I was thirsty, I drank from the mountain spring. When I was hungry, I ate wild fruits to fill my stomach. Just like that, I managed to cultivate to the 10th rank of qi condensation. That was the end of the contents of the scroll. However, by chance I accidentally ate a spirit fruit. Just like that, I unknowingly broke through to foundation establishment. Master is really lucky. In order to reach the foundation establishment realm, I suffered a lot. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. When I buried the dead body, I took his sword. With my foundation establishment realm cultivation, I comprehended the sword kinesis technique and flew out of the cliff. At that time, when I saw that I could fly, I thought that I had already learned the wonderful method of immortals and became an immortal. After I came out, I secretly returned home. In the end, I found that the whole village had been destroyed by the flames of war. Since then, I used my foundation establishment realm cultivation to wander around. Later, when I met some people in the cultivation world, I realized how insignificant I was. I was originally just a foundation establishment realm rogue cultivator without a sect. After the foundation establishment realm, there are even higher realms. Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun with a strange expression. He thought to himself, a little foundation establishment realm cultivator without any ability actually dared to run around. He's really lucky that he didn't get killed. During those years in the cultivation world, I did indeed suffer a lot. But I thought, those cultivation sects cultivation arts are also created by people. It's not like they're born with it. Why can't I create my own cultivation art? Besides, my sword kinesis technique was originally created by me, so it's not something that's impossible to achieve. With this thought, I traveled around the world alone, concentrating on observing the things and things around me. Master's ambition is indeed not something ordinary people can reach. Yu Qianqiu didn't miss the opportunity to flatter him. Unfortunately, the effect was not very good. Bai Changchun didn't even look at him and continued, I watched the sea and clouds, the sunrise and sunset, the movement of the stars, the rise and fall of the sea, the ferocious beasts hunting in the deep mountains, the goshawks hunting rabbits in the grasslands, the thunderbolts in the rainy night, the dragonflies skimming the surface of the water by the pond, the water dripping through the stone under the eaves, the people coming and going in the busy city, the two armies fighting on the battlefield. After so many years, I had a lot of enlightenment. Once I understood it, my cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, and I became who I am today. Hearing that his cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He swallowed his saliva and said, Master, Can you teach me the cultivation art you've comprehended? I sincerely want to learn it. You still don't understand what I mean? Bai Changchun turned around and looked at him with his bright eyes. Damn it. Who the hell can understand what you're talking about? Jumping off a cliff, looking at the stars, looking at the pond, and watching rabbits? You can't possibly ask me to go and look at them all just because I'm full. I definitely won't be able to tell. Yu Qianshou grumbled in his heart. He said respectfully, I'm really foolish. I've left my cultivation art behind in the 4 great clans. Do you know why none of them could comprehend it? Bai Changchun asked. I don't know. Yu Qianshou answered straightforwardly. He thought to himself, Old man, can't you just explain things clearly? There's a generation gap of more than 2,000 years between us. It's really hard to communicate. I don't even know why you're talking so much nonsense. You're really foolish. Don't you understand? Your master's cultivation art doesn't have any fixed cultivation art. It's based on the Tao of heaven and earth. Everything in the world has its own Tao. I can borrow and use anything that's in common. This is your master's Tao to defeat the enemy. It's also why no one in the 4 great clans could learn it. My Tao relies on comprehension, not learning. Bai Changchun looked at him and sighed. Everything in the world has its own origin. Your master can only borrow it, but you can possess it. The difference between the two is obvious. If you borrow it, you'll be restricted, but if you possess it, you can do as you please. This time Yu Qianshou finally understood a little. He fell into deep thought. Bai Changchun looked at him and shook his head. He turned around and pointed at the lake. He said, This water looks calm and doesn't have any power. However, as long as you use it well, it can be ever-changing. Its power can reach the heavens. Why can't it defeat the enemy? You've comprehended the water art, but you can't feel it or use its power. This means that you can't use it well. This can be seen from your clumsy technique of controlling fire. Yu Qianshou, watch carefully now. Your master wants to borrow this lake water and display its power. I'll only do it once. Whether you can comprehend it or not depends on yourself. Chapter 309. Holius H*T. A super expert was about to perform. He couldn't miss this opportunity. Yu Qianshou's eyes widened immediately. He had been dragged down from the sky by Bai Changchun twice. Although he had experienced it himself, he had never seen Bai Changchun fight. He had only heard of it from a distant legend. Just as Bai Changchun finished speaking, Yu Qianshou's pupils shrank suddenly. He couldn't see anything else in his eyes. The old figure in front of him seemed to have merged with heaven and earth in an instant. Or rather, heaven and earth had merged with him. Only he could be seen standing there. The whole world seemed to have quietened down. The surrounding air seemed to have solidified. Yu Qianshou felt suffocated. He couldn't even breathe. He was about to be swallowed by that suffocating feeling. His eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of white cloth. Gradually he couldn't see anything. In a moment of desperation he bit the tip of his tongue. A sharp pain woke him up. The salty taste in his mouth told him that he had bitten his tongue. However, he finally woke up from that feeling of sinking to death. His eyes also regained clarity. Oh my God. He hadn't even made a move. With just a thought, the aura he emitted could kill people invisibly. It was no wonder that he could seriously injure a group of crossing tribulation stage experts from Fuxian Island who broke into the demon ghost region with just his divine sense. Yu Qianshou took a deep breath. He looked around and felt his heart palpitate. The rippling lake surface had completely calmed down. It was as clean as a mirror. Although he couldn't see the lake surface far away, at least he could see it. The surrounding flowers and trees swaying in the wind were as still as statues. The gentle breeze had disappeared. The palpitating feeling grew stronger. Yu Qianshou didn't even dare to breathe. He knew that Bai Changchun was about to make a move. The palpitating feeling was a sign that he was about to make a move. He moved. Bai Changchun casually waved his hand, and the surface of the lake beneath his feet rippled, slowly spreading into the distance. At first, nothing special could be seen, but as the ripples pushed out layer by layer, the ripples that rolled into the distance gradually turned into waves. Layer by layer, the waves finally formed into waves that surged into the distance, and the waves piled up higher and higher. Yu Qianshou looked around. He guessed that it wasn't just in front of him. The waves were spreading with Shuntian Island as the center. What was the old thing doing? Yu Qianshou couldn't understand. Looking around, the waves had already rolled for nearly a kilometer, and the height of the waves was probably close to 100 meters. Suddenly Yu Qianshou's head shook left and right. He looked around and then looked straight ahead. The waves seemed to be blocked by something a kilometer away. It was the same for the places he could see to his left and right. Hua. Standing on the island, one could hear the sound of the waves crashing into each other. One could see the waves crashing into each other. With a reverse roll, the 100-meter-high waves quickly swayed back. Hua. Rumble. The 100-meter-high waves were originally spreading in all directions. Due to the shrinking of the circle, the centripetal force generated was not small. This was like a bucket of water. When you punch it, the water will rush in all directions. But when it hits the wall of the bucket, the water will return to the center point. The 200 to 300-meter high waves came crashing back towards Shuntian Island with a deafening sound. The momentum was even more terrifying than standing in front of a tsunami. At the very least, a tsunami wouldn't be able to create such a high wave. The huge waves rushed over. If one wanted to see the white waves, they would have to raise their heads. Yu Qianqiu could feel the Shuntian Island shaking. He looked at Bai Changchun in fear. What was this old man trying to do? If he didn't know that the deficient flame profound fruit was still on the island, Yu Qianqiu would have already escaped with his sword. With such a huge wave rushing over, the pressure it produced was more than 10,000 caddies. With his current cultivation, even if he didn't die, he would not be far from it. Just when the wave was less than 100 meters away from Shuntian Island, Bai Changchun flashed his palms and fiercely pushed against the huge wave. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know how powerful his palms were, he was still forced back a dozen steps by the aura released from his palms. His blood and chi were in turmoil. Two huge handprints suddenly appeared on the wave wall a few hundred meters in front of them, forcibly stopping the advance of the huge wave. Who knew how much strength was needed to do that? Suddenly, Bai Changchun swung his arms left and right. When the huge wave was about to reach Shuntian Island, it suddenly received a heavy blow. The wave that was formed instantly collapsed and retreated into the distance. That casual swing of his arms seemed elegant, but it was unknown how much energy was contained in it to be able to repel such a huge wave in an instant. The crisis was resolved just like that? Good heavens! Yu Qianqiu looked at both sides and his heart was thumping hard. This old guy was too awesome. No wonder he was a late-stage deity transformation cultivator. He really had the ability to overturn rivers and seas. As soon as he looked in front of him, Yu Qianqiu was immediately stunned. An ice wall that was nearly 100 meters high was floating on the surface of the water. It was sparkling and translucent under the sunlight, and there were even frozen fish inside. This was clearly the place where Bai Changchun had blocked the wave with his palms. The two huge handprints were still there. Although it was nearly 100 meters away from Shuntian Island, the dense white cold air had already begun to close in. It had instantly solidified into ice, and it was such a big piece. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his eyes several times in disbelief. After confirming that there was no doubt, he speechlessly looked at Bai Changchun. He really didn't understand what he meant by doing this. Could it be that he wanted to show off his cultivation? Bai Changchun turned his head to look at him and said indifferently, "Weak water can also turn into raging waves. Formless can also turn into tangible forms." Then he flicked two fingers at the edge of the lake. With a light flick, a pillar of water jumped out of the lake and circled around the surface of the lake like a dragon. Suddenly, it ferociously attacked Yu Qianqiu. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu cried out in shock. "Master, what are you doing?" Before he could even take a few steps, he was entangled by the water dragon. It coiled around his body and in an instant he was completely wrapped up. Inside the water dragon, Yu Qianqiu was struggling with his eyes closed. Suddenly, his mouth opened wide and his eyes widened, revealing an expression of disbelief. The water that was wrapped around him also fell to the ground with a hua sound. The moment he was enveloped by the water, Yu Qianqiu felt the water drilling into his 7 orifices. It was fine if the water entered his mouth and nose, but if it entered his eyes and ears, it would be terrible. This was not the same as when water entered his eyes and ears when he was swimming. He would become deaf and blind. Therefore he immediately used his internal energy to resist. Who knew that the despicable water would not let go of his buttocks? His buttocks felt cold and he was immediately shocked. Fortunately, Bai Changchun was lenient. Otherwise he would be the first man in history to be raped by water. Yu Qianqiu stood there like a drowned rat. A pair of dead fish eyes stared at Bai Changchun. He bit his lips and held back the word despicable, but he did not dare to say it out loud. Water is invisible, but it can penetrate through any hole, Bai Changchun said indifferently. He stretched out 2 fingers and flicked at the surface of the lake again. This time 2 water pillars jumped out and turned into 2 swimming dragons. Again. Yu Qianqiu immediately panicked. With an extremely miserable voice, he quickly begged for mercy, "Master, your power is boundless, please spare me." However, the two water dragons did not give him any face at all. They quickly pounced on him and circled around him, tearing off his clothes. Then he turned into two puddles of water and fell to the ground. Yu Qianqiu was so embarrassed that his face turned green. His hands covered the important parts of his lower body, and he was about to go berserk. Fortunately, no one was watching. In the end, he hurriedly took out a set of clothes from the storage bag on the ground and quickly put them on. Water is weak, but it can also be powerful. Bai Changchun's tone was still calm. He flicked his finger, and a water pillar that was much bigger than the previous two jumped out of the lake. Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately widened. He saw that the water pillar had turned into a sharp icicle. Bai Changchun waved his hand, and the icicle made a "whoo" sound. It quickly shot towards the huge floating ice that was almost 100 meters away. With a loud hong sound, the floating ice collapsed into a few pieces and swayed on the surface of the water. When water turns into ice, it can also subdue the enemy. Bai Changchun said indifferently as he looked at the collapsed floating ice. It was not targeted at him. Yu Qianqiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Bai Changchun turned around, looked at him and said, "Now, do you still think that the water art is useless? The key is how you use it. I can do this just by borrowing the water. You have the source, so you should be able to display an even greater advantage. Of course, it is a fact that my cultivation is higher than yours, but that is only in terms of power. In terms of using it, you should be better than me." Disciple understands. Disciple will definitely try to figure it out. Yu Qianqiu's expression was full of grievance. He decided in his heart that he would not tell anyone about what happened today even if he was beaten to death. Also, your method of controlling fire is extremely clumsy. With such a tyrannical green fire, why do you only know how to set it on fire? You can control 100 swords at the same time, so why can't you use fire to control swords? Why don't you put more effort into this? I believe that your power will definitely increase greatly. Bai Changchun taught. It could be said that this was the first time he taught someone like this. In the past, although Healy was also his disciple, he had never enjoyed this kind of treatment. It was clear that he saw Yu Qianqiu in a different light. He still needed to ponder over the previous words, but this sentence immediately sank in. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he thought to himself, "That's right. Why didn't I think of that? If I changed the sword control to the green fire control, then wouldn't I be killing my enemies everywhere?" The old man was indeed an old man. His foresight was indeed unique. Disciple will remember master's teachings. Yu Qianqiu bowed respectfully. His previous unhappiness immediately disappeared. Bai Changchun nodded and said, "Based on my many years of cultivation experience in this world, there should be more than 2 types of fire and water sources. I estimate that there should be 5 types. You were able to understand 2 types, so you can more or less comprehend things that others don't know. If you have the heart, you can try to understand the other types of sources." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was filled with deep respect and immediately bowed deeply. In this world, there was no such thing as the 5 elements, but the old man was actually able to understand it. It was really not simple. "Alright, I have said what I need to say. You practice diligently. When the time is right, I will let you go out and do some things for master." Bai Changchun turned around and slowly walked towards the center of the island. As he walked, he did not forget to remind him, "I have already taken care of the deficient flame profound fruit for you for 20 days. If you dare to be lazy again, I will not forgive you." Disciple will not dare again. Yu Qianqiu bowed to send him off. He thought to himself, "These words don't make sense. I am obviously helping you take care of it. How did it become you helping me take care of it?" After he got up, he was stunned again. 20 days had already passed? Adding on the days that he had wasted before, tomorrow would be the beginning of the month. It was the day that he had arranged to meet with the Demon Kings and the Ghost King. Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sun in the sky and walked towards the vegetable garden with a smile on his face. Not only did he successfully cultivate the water arts, he was also able to receive guidance from the old man. This old man with a cultivation level of soul formation final stage was really powerful. With just the casual guidance, he had benefited a lot. However, he did not know what kind of things he wanted him to do. He also did not know if it would be dangerous or not. Chapter 310. After replenishing the spirit stones for the deficient flame profound fruit, Yu Qianqiu returned to the lakeside where Bai Changchun had demonstrated and sat down cross-legged. He carefully recalled Bai Changchun's every move. Although the huge ice floe had been smashed into pieces, it still had a considerable volume floating on the surface of the lake. Under the scorching sun, the sparkling and translucent ice gradually melted. Water droplets dripped from the edges and corners of the ice floe, splashing on the surface of the lake. The cracked ice floe swayed not far from the shore. After witnessing Bai Changchun's momentum, which could overturn rivers and seas with a wave of his hand, Yu Qianqiu no longer doubted that he could split a mountain with a single sword strike. However, he couldn't figure out how he could instantly turn water into ice. What's more, it was such a large piece. Bai Changchun said he could do it too. Yu Qianqiu knitted his brows tightly as his gaze fell on the floating ice that was drifting closer and closer. Suddenly, he stood up abruptly and hurriedly took a few steps forward. His feet stomped on the shore and his body shot out gracefully. He somersaulted several times in the air and flew diagonally to the largest floating ice that was more than 20 meters tall and 30 meters away from the shore. Standing on the floating ice floe, Yu Qianqiu turned his head to look at the spot where he had jumped 30 meters away. A smile appeared on his face. Presumably, if he used all his strength to jump, he should be able to cross 50 meters with the help of inertia. With this distance, he would definitely be considered a top-notch Qigong expert in the secular world. He had never practiced Qigong in the secular world. Being able to jump so far was naturally related to his cultivation reaching the nascent soul stage. At the very least, when he was at the core formation stage, he wouldn't have been able to jump so far. Remembering that he could already fly after reaching the nascent soul stage, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He casually took out a jade archive from his storage pouch. The contents of the archive were all stolen from the cultivation pavilion of Fuxin Island. There was a method to fly after reaching the nascent soul stage. For someone who had already reached the nascent soul stage, this was not a very profound method. It was just a technique to grasp. Yu Qianqiu put away the jade archive and circulated his quintessential essence around his body, controlling his body to maintain a delicate relationship with the air. His feet gradually left the floating ice and he slowly floated up into the air. However, his shaky appearance showed that he was not proficient enough. After tossing and turning for a while, he could barely raise his body to a height of 20 meters in the air. It was even more difficult for him to fly. Moving left and right was no different from crawling. How could it be considered flying? Now he finally understood why most of the nascent soul stage cultivators still couldn't use sword kinesis flight. The key was that their cultivation wasn't high enough. Only when their cultivation was high enough to control their body in the air would they be able to truly fly. If that didn't work, then flying on the sword would be faster than before. Yu Qianqiu struggled to maintain his balance in the air. The long sword on his back shot out with a clang, and a cold light drew a half arc in the air, supporting him steadily. His feet sank and with a single thought, the flying sword carried him diagonally up into the sky. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a black dot. Not long after, the black dot grew larger. Yu Qianqiu turned sideways, stepping on the sword with his hands behind his back. His clothes and long hair fluttered behind him as he broke through the air, rushing towards the floating ice he had been standing on earlier. Just as they were about to collide, Yu Qianqiu quickly shot up from the flying sword and transformed into a human silhouette, falling towards the lake. The cold light turned and flashed to chase after him, once again supporting him. A human silhouette could be seen darting in and out of the fragmented floating ice, extremely nimble and fast. Finally, he flew in circles around the largest floating ice. Abruptly, Yu Qianqiu shot up again, spreading his arms wide as he landed lightly in the middle of the floating ice. Just as he landed, the flying sword quickly chased after him. With a clang, it returned to its scabbard and quieted down along with him. Awesome. A nascent soul cultivator's flying sword was indeed incomparable to a core formation cultivator's. Yu Qianqiu relaxed and let out a breath. His gaze fell on the huge floating ice and his brows furrowed again. Since he cultivated the water art, controlling water shouldn't be a problem. However, how did he turn water into ice? Yu Qianqiu slowly walked to the edge of the floating ice, his gaze wandering between the floating ice and the lake water. He believed that since Bai Changchun said he could do it, then he would definitely be able to do it. Yu Qianqiu released his divine sense into the lake water. A sense of intimacy arose spontaneously, as if the lake water was a part of his body. Suddenly, following the teasing of his fingers, streams of clear lake water jumped out of the lake and fell back down, making dong 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 sounds. When his divine sense wandered to the point where the floating ice and the lake water met, his fingers suddenly stopped teasing. At this moment, Bai Changchun's voice suddenly rang in his ears, reminding him in a timely manner, "Everything has two sides." When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. So stupid. Yu Qianqiu slapped his forehead and suddenly came to a realization. The reason why water could freeze was naturally because of the low temperature. He cultivated the fire art, so controlling temperature was his forte. If he could control it well, he could make the surrounding temperature frighteningly high, and if he absorbed the temperature, he could naturally lower the surrounding temperature. Wasn't this the opposite of things? Thank you for your advice, master. Yu Qianqiu bowed towards the center of the island. With a backhand gesture, he raised his hand towards the surface of the lake. With a xiao sound, a stream of lake water flew over and formed a water ball in his palm. Holding the water ball in his palm, he circulated the fire art, and the temperature in his palm rapidly decreased. In an instant, a dense white gas appeared, and a crystal-clear ice ball was formed in the blink of an eye. And the temperature that was absorbed into his palm was instantly swallowed up by the fire element, becoming a tonic for the green fire element. This bit of temperature was simply too insignificant when integrated into the green fire element. When things reach an extreme, they will move in the opposite direction. So that's how it is. Ah. Yu Qianqiu danced excitedly. He casually threw the ice ball and summoned the lake water to test it out. All kinds of ice crystals were formed in his hands. In the end, he became more and more proficient. Raising both of his palms, 10 water pillars emerged from the lake. Both of his hands stretched out 2 fingers and quickly pointed at the 10 water pillars. In the blink of an eye, ice pillars were formed and fell back into the water. Satisfying. Yu Qianqiu let out a hollow cry and suddenly jumped straight towards the surface of the water under the ice flow. The moment his feet touched the surface of the water, white frost immediately appeared on the surface of the water, crackling and spreading in all directions. Not long after, the ice flow within a radius of a few hundred meters was instantly frozen by the ice formed on the surface of the water. Yu Qianqiu cheered excitedly on the layer of ice. It was hard not to be happy about this kind of magic that almost conquered the laws of nature. Just like what Bai Changchun had said, as long as it was used properly, it would definitely have a miraculous effect in future conflicts. As the saying goes, once you understand one thing, all will follow. From this, Yu Qianqiu thought that even if he didn't absorb the fire element in the future, he would probably be able to create fire out of thin air just by absorbing the temperature of the surroundings. Of course, this kind of fire couldn't be compared to a heavenly fire like the blue fire. After his emotions calmed down a little, he suddenly thought of something. Yu Qianqiu felt that it was a little strange. Bai Changchun hadn't cultivated the fire spell before, so how did he turn such a huge wave into ice in an instant? Even he couldn't do it with his current cultivation. Such a huge wave hitting him, not to mention turning him into ice, he was afraid that the huge force generated would be enough to slap him half to death. He thought for a moment and had a guess. Bai Changchun always talked about the heavenly Tao, so his understanding of the natural climate change was definitely not something that others could compare to. He must have used his profound cultivation to instantly create an extreme difference in the temperature and quickly turn the huge wave into ice. If that was really the case, Yu Qianqiu shuddered. He didn't know about other soul formation stage cultivators, but that old man's cultivation was really too terrifying. Because of his previous comprehension, his guess was correct. The method that Bai Changchun used was exactly the same as he thought. But it was also because he knew the reason behind it that he was able to understand even more how terrifying Bai Changchun was. A huge wave that reached the sky turned into ice in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and decided not to think about it anymore. The more he thought about it, the more terrified he felt. The more he thought about it, the more insignificant he felt. He raised his palm and with a buzz, a faint blue flame ignited. He looked around at the ice floating around him and thought, I should just listen to the old man's words and try to use the Guiyuan sword technique to control the blue fire. Chapter 311. The 1,000-mile lake in front of Obedient Island was a small world of ice. A few huge ice floes were already connected together by the ice on the surface of the lake. The snow-white lake, the sparkling and translucent ice floes, under the illumination of the sun, the small world was completely different from the surrounding environment. Yu Qianqiu stood on the surface of the frozen lake, standing in the middle of a few huge ice floes. 100 balls of green flame floated around him, and under the illumination of the green flame, the surrounding ice floes also reflected an enchanting green radiance. Damn it! Directly using fire to attack is too slow, and the larger the size, the greater the resistance. Looks like I have to compress the green flame into the shape of a flying sword. Yu Qianqiu frowned as he muttered to himself. His hands quickly formed a series of hand seals, and the 100 balls of green flame slowly lengthened. After many experiments, he finally managed to compress the green flame into the shape of a flying sword. He pointed at one of the ice floes, and a green flying sword shot out, silently piercing through the ice floes. Recalling the flying sword, Yu Qianqiu frowned again. Although the problem of speed was solved, the ice floes were not pierced by the flying sword itself. Instead, it was because the flying sword was compressed by the green flame, and the high temperature melted a hole in the ice floes. This was not the result he wanted. Since he was going to make the green flame into a flying sword, he had to make it look like a real flying sword. Otherwise, it would be inconvenient for him to launch a sneak attack. Just think about it, if someone discovered that there was something strange about the sword, they would definitely be on guard. With a series of hand seals, the 99 flying swords shot towards him, and instantly disappeared into his body. Only one flying sword floated in front of him, and he needed to concentrate on studying it. He was currently making adjustments to the fire, and his hand seals were moving like shadows. After a long time, he suddenly pointed 2 fingers at one of the ice floes and lightly shouted, "Go!" A cold azure light flashed and a crisp ding sound rang out. Half of the azure flying sword's body was inserted into the floating ice, and the other half with the hilt was trembling non-stop. Success. Yu Qianqiu looked at the flying sword with a smug smile. Then he spun around on the ice like a spinning top. Swish swish. In the blink of an eye, his body emitted countless green lights. When he stopped, there were already 99 green flying swords revolving around him. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and hooked 2 of his fingers. Then he pulled out the flying sword that was stuck in the floating ice with a schwa sound. A green light flashed, and the 100th flying sword appeared beside him. Go! Yu Qianqiu shouted and waved both his arms. Green light shot out in all directions, and the huge floating ice on the surface of the ice immediately became the target of the flying swords. For a time the green light flashed, and ding-ding-dang-dang sounds rang out incessantly. Not long after, the surface of the ice was covered with chunks of broken ice. Burn! Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes, opened his arms and muttered to himself. Boom! The 100 scattered flying swords instantly exploded into raging flames. The green and demonic raging flames instantly turned the cool world into a place that could burn everything. Not even a piece of ice could be found in the surroundings. The water that appeared instantly melted into the lake and created quite a bit of waves. Yu Qianqiu calmly stood on the surface of the water and didn't sink, moving up and down with the waves. When he put his hands behind his back, the green flames surged into his body, and the 1,000-mile lake returned to its original appearance. There were no floating ice, no raging flames, and everything was as it was before. Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged in the house in the center of the island, smiled and slightly nodded his head. He opened his mouth and transmitted his voice, "Come here." This transmission was naturally sent to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, who was secretly enjoying the aftertaste of the lake, opened his eyes in a daze. The long sword on his back was unsheathed, and a cold light shot into the water, carrying him to the center of the island. Putting away the sword, he quickly walked into the main hall, bowed and said, "Master, you were looking for me?" Bai Changchun opened his eyes and expressionlessly said, "Yu Qianqiu, are you willing to sincerely worship me as your master?" "What is this? Didn't I already worship you as my master long ago?" Yu Qianqiu's face was full of doubt. "Disciple is naturally sincere. I will give you one more chance to choose. Think carefully. Once you truly become my disciple, there will be a heavy burden on you, and it will be difficult for you to escape for the rest of your life. Think carefully now, think carefully. Don't worry if you are not willing, I will not make things difficult for you. I will naturally let you out of the demon region, and from then on, there will be no more relationship between us." Bai Changchun said indifferently. "Fuck. So I wasn't your real disciple before." Yu Qianqiu's expression was a little strange and he asked, "Master, disciple has something to ask you." "Speak." Bai Changchun replied. "Dare I ask, Master, was the previous Crane Li your real disciple?" Yu Qianqiu hesitated for a while but still opened his mouth. This question was very important to him. If the Crane Li had the same status as him, then it would not be a big deal. However, if the Crane Li was Bai Changchun's real disciple as a master, it would be very difficult for him to accept the fact that his disciple was killed, even if the disciple had made a huge mistake. He never thought of himself as a good person, but he always had his own bottom line, and he had his own judgment of right and wrong. There were some things that he could pretend to be courteous but he could not accept. The crane Li was originally a white crane that the previous punishment envoy raised on Obedient Island when I took over the demon region. After he cultivated to become a spirit, he became my mount, and after taking human form he became my disciple. He was not a real disciple in the sense of a master and disciple. He's the same as you right now. He's just a nominal disciple of mine. I've never taught him anything, so we're not truly master and disciple in the truest sense of the word. Do you have any more questions? Bai Changchun's tone was very calm. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief, but he still asked in doubt, I have not been in contact with you for a long time, but the crane Li has been with you for so many years, why did you not take him as your disciple? There is no why, no why. Bai Changchun looked at him and said slowly, the reason is very simple, he is too distant and cares too much about the difference between humans and demons, so he became disloyal. I knew this a long time ago and it was not because you exposed me. However, he has been with me for many years, and I have always given him opportunities. Otherwise, I would have killed him long ago, and you would not have had the chance to do it. So that was why. Yu Qianqiu nodded and continued to ask, you just said that after becoming your true disciple, I will have a heavy responsibility, and it will be difficult for me to get rid of it for the rest of my life. Can I know what this heavy responsibility is? No, this is something my disciple should know. You do not have the right to know and you do not need to know. Bai Changchun refused without hesitation and asked, have you thought it through? I will ask you one last time, are you willing to take me as your master? *CK. Such an important question, if you don't tell me, what if you send me to my death? Yu Qianqiu thought about it and still felt that following him had more advantages than disadvantages, so he bowed deeply and said, this disciple is willing. Bai Changchun nodded with satisfaction, and stretched out his hand to point in front of him and said, kneel, perform the ceremony of taking me as your master. At this time Yu Qianqiu's mentality was a little desperate, and he took a few steps forward, kneeled down and cupped his fists and said, this disciple greets master. After saying that, he kowtowed 3 times. Alright, sit down. Didn't you want to know what kind of heavy responsibility you will have to shoulder? Sit down, master will slowly tell you. Bai Changchun pointed at the place where Yu Qianqiu was kneeling. Chapter 312. Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged and Bai Changchun asked, what do you think of my cultivation? The former smiled and said, I can't say, but it's very high. It's the highest I've ever seen. The latter wasn't modest and nodded. After my cultivation level reached the late deity transformation stage, people at this level called me the #1 expert in the world. There were also people who called me the #1 expert in the cultivation world. Although such a title is somewhat suspicious, I believe that I still have no match in the deity transformation stage. I'm telling you this not to boast, but to let you know that it won't be a disgrace to you to have me as your master. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a little dizzy. The world's #1 expert and the cultivation world's #1, these titles were really awesome. Awesome people really deserved awesome titles. He knew that Bai Changchun's cultivation was high, but he hadn't seen other soul formation experts, so he couldn't compare. He didn't expect his master to be the world's #1 expert. He remembered that his first master, Hao Sansi, was only at the nascent soul stage, his second master was at the tribulation passing stage, and his third master was at the soul formation stage. His masters came one after another, and their cultivation levels were higher than the one before. Unfortunately, none of them taught him anything. He didn't know if he would have a fourth master, but this master was already the world's #1 expert. According to the speed of his progress, would he have to become an immortal's master in the future? Wouldn't it be a bit too shameless to always have a master like this? Who cares? Hirogua has more masters in the Condor Shooting League. He has more than 70 masters and I only have 3. It's not much. Didn't sage Confucius say that among 3 people, there must be a master? Damn it. I respect the ancient teachings more than the ancient teachings. Among 3 people, all of them are my masters. That's humble enough, right? With a reason to comfort himself, Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, Master, it's my honor to have you as my master. How can it be a disgrace to me? Bai Changchun nodded and didn't dwell on this topic. He asked, do you know the origin of this demon domain? Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, I don't know, I'd like to hear the details. Have you heard of the war in the ancient times? Bai Changchun smiled and asked, then do you know why there was such a war? Yu Qianqiu shook his head again. It has been more than 100,000 years since the war. At that time there was no demon domain. At that time humans, demons, and ghosts coexisted and went their own ways. Until one day, for some unknown reason, the immortals from the upper realm came alone or in groups of 3 to 5. There were even many who came riding on divine beasts from the upper realm. One after another, they descended into the human world and started fighting, causing chaos in the human world. Demons and ghosts ran amok, and the people had no way to live. Under the temptation of the previous immortals, the cultivators in the human world also joined in, Bai Changchun said with a sigh. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows, and his expression was a little strange. Judging from the old man's expression, he didn't seem to be bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying mankind, nor was he worried about the misfortune of the common people. Why did it feel like he was born at the wrong time? Could it be that the old man had been a loner seeker for defeat for too long, and wanted nothing more than to be born in troubled times? At that time, the masters of the cultivation world didn't know why the immortals of the upper realm were fighting each other. They only knew that they were fighting for something. Even the immortals of the upper realm were willing to risk their lives to fight for it. Naturally, it attracted more and more masters of the cultivation world to participate in it. As a result, the cultivation world was in a mess. Until one day another person came down from the upper realm. This person rode on the number 1 divine beast of the celestial realm. As long as there was a big fight in the mortal world, he would appear and join in the fun. The celestials who came down from the lower realm would run away as soon as they saw him. They were extremely afraid of him, and those celestials called him the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. The Myriad Swords Demon Monarch? Yu Qianqiu suddenly frowned and muttered, Master, I think I heard Wu Huagan, the son of the Wu clan's current master, mention this person before. He said that he could control tens of thousands of flying swords to fight against the enemy. I didn't expect that he was also an immortal of the upper realm. Yes, this person could indeed control tens of thousands of flying swords to fight against the enemy. At that time, none of the immortals were a match for him. They could only run away when they encountered him. Bai Changchun said with admiration, because the immortals only knew how to run away, he felt very bored, so he set up a heaven and earth formation and trapped all the immortals in it. He wandered around the mortal world, and whenever he felt bored, he would run into the heaven and earth formation and find someone to fight with. One time, the immortals who were trapped in the formation finally stopped hiding. They used a trick and joined forces to attack him. Finally, he was seriously injured. When he returned to the outside world to recuperate, he saw that the mortal world was not peaceful, so he became kind. When he had free time, he drove most of the demons and ghosts in the world together, which became the demons and ghosts domain of today. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that there was such a super awesome person who would beat up immortals to relieve his boredom. He asked in shock, Master, you mean that the Eastern Holy Land and the demons and ghosts domain were created by him? Yes. Bai Changchun nodded, then suddenly shook his head and said, just when he was seriously injured, 2 people came down from the upper realm, but they were his sworn enemies. After a fierce battle, the demon monarch of 10,000 swords finally died. At that point, the chaotic era of ancient times came to an end, and the world began to be dominated by humans. Yu Qianqiu suddenly realized something. He let out a breath and said, Master, what did those immortals want to steal? Who got it in the end? The star pearl. Bai Changchun sighed and said, It's said that it's a pearl formed by the power of the stars in the universe. It only appears once every 100 million years. Whoever confused with it can become a god. A god is an existence that surpasses the immortals of the upper realm. They are unrestrained, immortal, and live forever. As for who got the star pearl in the end, no one knows. TSK. No wonder even the immortals wanted to steal it. So there's such a good treasure. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He rubbed his chin and thought to himself, if only I could get it. There was an old saying that went, you don't know how lucky you are when you are blessed. It was probably referring to people like him. It's time to let your imagination run wild. But he didn't think about the golden pearl that made him who he was today from a mortal. That's right, Master. Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked, didn't they say that the demon monarch of 10,000 swords came down to the mortal world with him? What kind of divine beast is it? Where did that divine beast go? It's a dragon. It's said to be a red dragon. As for where it went, no one knows. It probably died at the hands of the demon monarch of 10,000 swords, 2 sworn enemies. Bai Changchun sighed. Dragon? A red dragon? F***ck your grandma. It can't be that coincidental, can it? Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched and his eyes widened. The scene he saw under Twilight Valley's green fire appeared in his mind. The scene that scared him so much that he had to crawl and run for his life seemed to be that of a red dragon, and it even talked to him passionately. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.